This king is quite the fool. In just 1 year, he had 16 little babies in the harem. The 16th daughter is like a mystery. The king even finds it interesting to know her name. When Talon went to propose to his majesty, the king pretended to be a loving father and a dutiful daughter. He claimed to have doted on the 16th daughter since she was little. The bride price absolutely cannot be taken lightly. But in fact, he doesn't even know what his daughter is called. Talon doesn't care about these details at all. He directly presents a diamond mine island as a betrothal gift. The officer was genuinely shocked to hear this. That's just way too extravagant. Upon hearing that the wedding would be very simple, and that the master would go to his territory for a while after getting married, the officer initially thought something big had happened in the territory. Seeing the relaxed smile on the master's face, he finally realized. The master simply finds it a hassle. After all, a normal wedding takes up most of the day. But his master has always been a heartless person, completely indifferent to others, always placing himself above all, utterly arrogant. He is a true dictator. Probably only marrying for the sake of status. The aide increasingly feels sorry for the princess, marrying such a selfish and ruthless man. He can already imagine the Duchess filling her emptiness with alcohol in the future. Since the Duke of Turan visited, Lucia has been moved to her new residence, Rose Palace. She is taken care of in her daily life, every day dressed in fine clothes, living in luxury. To be honest, he is really not used to it. Walking down the empty corridor, Lucia feels an overwhelming emptiness inside. This palace was originally given by the king to his most beloved consort. Every year, in early spring, the roses bloom throughout the courtyard, which is why it is called the Rose Palace. But there is less than a month left before she marries into the Duke of Turan's household. As the scene shifts, Lucia is sitting in the hall drinking cola. Suddenly, a guard comes in to report that His Majesty is unwell, and hopes Lucia will go visit the Emperor. I have never seen myself. My body started shaking uncontrollably. He found that he couldn't move at all. After struggling internally for a moment, Lucia slowly spoke, wishing him a speedy recovery. I feel unwell. I cannot walk. As she spoke, Lucia forced a smile. Please go back. The hall has returned to silence. Lucia is enjoying her tea as usual. He knows that his father does not want to see him. What he wants to see is the Duke of Talon's fiancée. But what can he do if he wants to see her? He does not want to see that man. Over here, the Duke of Talon has found His Highness the Crown Prince. Now they have joined forces to stand united against others. The Crown Prince was shocked to hear the news that Turang was returning to the north. After hearing it would take 2 years, the Crown Prince completely broke down. It turns out they are now allies, joining forces to stand united against others. Because Turang's strength is too formidable, as long as they know of his existence, it's enough to suppress everything. Although the war is now over, everyone is eager for the spoils. However, Talon doesn't take them seriously at all. As long as he acts, no one can defeat him. The prince still wants to persuade him to stay, but Talon has made up his mind, and said that during this period, only the throne would change. He would return early only for that reason. He then stood up to take his leave. Suddenly, the man, remembering something, stopped in his tracks. He told the crown prince about the guard princess who was marrying him. Upon hearing this, the crown prince completely broke down. No one told him at all. And which princess is it anyway? Over here, Lucia lies in bed, struggling to fall asleep. Tomorrow is the wedding. Looking at the moonlight outside the window, Lucia feels an indescribable emotion inside. If she says there's no regret, that would definitely be a lie. But whenever he thinks of the tragic situation in his dreams, he feels that everything now is worth it. The wedding ceremony is very simple. No guests, no blessings, no vows. Lucia stands beside the man, in the simplest wedding dress. Turan is dressed in armor, with a calm expression on his face. For him, today is no different from any other day. In the presence of the priest, the two signed the marriage certificate, officially becoming husband and wife. Until they were in the carriage on the way back, Lucia felt like she was living in a dream. The sun is shining brightly outside the car window. It only took them one morning. They completed the wedding. Lucia stole a glance at the man sitting across from her. Duke Turan had already begun to handle his official duties. Lucia believed she had no strong feelings about the wedding. Just now in the hall, they even omitted the symbolic vow of the Bobo. After all, neither of them believes they can stay together for a lifetime. Just then, the man suddenly uttered 2 words, tomorrow. Lucia, lost in thought, jumped in surprise. She quickly shouted back, room. Talon looked at Lucia, whose cheeks were flushed, a bit speechless. But he reminded her not to be so loud. He was right next to her. Lucia felt even more embarrassed. She was afraid the Duke would notice she had just been staring at his lips. If she got caught, that would be too humiliating. Talon didn't think about that much. He just continued what he had left unsaid earlier. He told Lucia that they were likely to set off for the north tomorrow morning. If he wanted to stay in the capital, he could stay. But the north is different from the capital. The conditions there are harsh. There isn't much to do for fun. Lucia thought seriously for a moment. In the end, she decided to go with me. Although their marriage was merely a matter of mutual benefit, it wouldn't be appropriate to separate right after getting married. The carriage continued to move steadily forward. Lucia felt a terrible headache. After arriving at the Duke's residence, the butler, Taiju, was already standing at the door ready to greet her. Lucia found him very familiar, and happily greeted him. She mentioned that the cookies from last time were really delicious. It was the first time Taiju saw such a bright smile, and he was momentarily taken aback. Startled, she thanked the Duchess. Then she asked whether the lady wanted to have a meal first or rest, or perhaps take a stroll around the Duke's residence. Speaking of which, Lucia immediately felt a splitting headache. After staying in the other palace for so long, she had developed a migraine. She didn't expect it to flare up at this moment. Lucia forced herself to stay calm. She said she wanted to rest for a while. She changed into her pajamas. She snuggled into the soft big bed. Lucia let out a comfortable sigh. She had only held a wedding after getting up today, but she felt utterly exhausted. Lost in thought, the girl's consciousness gradually blurred. She slowly fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up again, it was the maid who called her. Lucia sat up in a panic. Her adorable appearance made the maid smile. The maid comforted her, telling her not to be afraid. It was already time for dinner. She is here to serve her. Only after asking did she know that she had already slept for 6 hours. Lucia now feels refreshed. She casually asked if the Duke had eaten. The maid replied that the Duke was busy with work, and might have a simple meal in the office. Lucia only felt a rumble. The sky is about to collapse. Is he really going to face a room full of servants at dinner alone? He gritted his teeth and finished the meal. Lucia slowly walked toward the bedroom. It was just as the sun was setting. There was a large expanse of morning glow outside the window. Lucia unconsciously stopped in her tracks. She now had a life that was so much better than the future. But he found himself unsatisfied with the status quo. He wanted more autonomy. At that moment, Taiju appeared from the side. He asked if the lady wanted to tour the residence. Lucia gladly accepted. It was just the right time to digest. Unexpectedly, the Duke's residence was just too large. Lucia felt like she could never finish exploring in a day. As she went upstairs, Lucia casually asked if the Talon family had always lived here. She received a negative response. Taiju told the Duchess that the Talon family didn't have a residence in the capital before. They bought this place a few years ago. Originally, there were over 100 residences, but they have all been torn down. Now there is only this one left. Lucia was once again stunned by the money. Just now, the maid brought her essential oil made from fresh flowers that can make the skin smooth. After all, tonight is the wedding night. Lucia originally wanted to ask the maid if the Duke would come tonight, but then she thought better of it. There really wasn't any need for him to come over. After all, he already has a son who can inherit the title. Thinking about it this way, Lucia felt relieved. She lay on the bed and began to overthink. Although she had promised that she would never fall in love with him, feelings are inherently difficult to control. If it's just about looks, one might as well say it. This man is too striking, especially that nose. Just right, not too much, not too little. Thinking about it, Lucia blushed again. She quickly sat up straight from the bed. On a dark, windy night, maybe I should think of something else. Lucia started wandering around the room. She pondered what a duchess should do. It seemed to be only socializing, but socializing was what she was worst at. Lucia suddenly remembered the duchess she had seen in her dream. She did quite well. Lucia was taken aback. I have now become a duchess. What will the woman who was supposed to be the duchess become? Lucia feels a bit guilty, but she also needs this marriage. If she isn't selfish, she won't be able to survive in this perilous world. Suddenly, Lucia's attention was drawn to something beside her. It was actually red wine. Lucia's eyes lit up immediately. She decided to have a drink to celebrate her brand new future. In the end, she ended up with an empty bottle. The girl lay on the counter like a puddle of mud. She clearly remembered only having a few drinks. Lucia suddenly felt both hot and thirsty. A bold thought flashed through her mind. The next second, the girl directly stripped off all her clothes. Lucia stretched comfortably. She was just about to have another drink. The door suddenly swung open. Talon, who had just come out of the shower, stared blankly at the scene before her. The two exchanged a glance. Lucia was completely bewildered. The wine glass in her hand smashed to the floor. The man shouted, "Don't move." Then he stepped forward boldly. He picked up his completely naked wife and hugged her tightly. He tucked her into the blanket. Lucia felt like she had embarrassed the blanket. She clutched the blanket, not daring to move. Charon found it somewhat amusing. He sat down at the edge of the bed. He joked that she had seen everything she needed to see. What else do you have to hide now? Lucia flushed and explained that she was just afraid of the heat. Then she loudly accused the man. She said she didn't know he would come over suddenly. Talon rebutted reasonably that this is my room. Isn't it normal for me to come back? The girl instantly looked aggrieved. When Taiju brought me here today, he didn't mention that this was his room at all. Talon thought about it for a moment, and realized that Taiju seemed to have mentioned something like that to her, but she was busy handling official business at the time, and didn't really pay attention. Then the man glanced down at the floor, and found it covered with empty bottles. Tara wore a playful smile. She planned to tease this little one. A drunk woman was waiting for me in the room, naked. Is it really a coincidence? Sure enough, Lucia reacted strongly. She argued loudly, I don't know how many beautiful women have barged into your room naked, but I definitely didn't mean it that way, and even if it was intentional, then he is now the only one qualified to do this. After that, the atmosphere fell silent. Lucia regretted what she had just said, but this guy really needs to be taught a lesson. If my words made you uncomfortable, I apologize. Talon looked seriously at the girl in front of him. I'm sorry, Lucia was a bit surprised. He thought that someone like Duke Talon would never apologize to anyone. The man couldn't hold it in any longer. He asked, in your eyes, how terrible is my image? Have you heard too many rumors about me? Lucia lightly retorted, stating that she never believed in rumors. He only believes in his own true feelings. In my eyes, you are a cold and domineering person. Charon found it somewhat novel. It was the first time he had heard someone mock him like this. Lucia quickly explained that she wasn't mocking him. She was just expressing her judgment. Talon turned around, silently staring at the woman in front of him. That same look again. Sincere, intense and reckless. It was the same look he had when he first met her. That's why he couldn't refuse that absurd proposal back then. Lucia felt a bit flustered under the gaze. The man suddenly leaned in. He teased, saying that she claimed to be the only woman qualified to be in his room. So why did she think he wouldn't show up? Talon slowly lifted the blanket covering the girl. Today is the wedding night. Lucia knew their marriage was without love. Anyway, they were going to the territory tomorrow. Spending a night of passion here wouldn't be so bad. Seeing the woman lost in thought, Talon thought he was unwilling. So he gentlemanly offered to stop. Lucia immediately retorted in annoyance that from a legal standpoint, I can't refuse, right? Talon almost lost his composure on the spot. Talking about the law in this situation, the man responded with irritation. Aren't you going to refuse on your wedding night? Lucia blurted out, that depends on your performance today. Talon laughed in anger. It's the first time someone dared to question his skills. Once the princess starts, you can't call it off midway. Have you thought it through? Lucia suddenly recalled the memories of her wedding night from her dreams. That's really quite terrible. The man is overweight, old and weak. He can only vent his anger by hitting him. Lucia reached out and slowly caressed the man's chest. If it could cover up those disgusting memories, he would be willing to give it a try. After all, the man in front of him looked so appetizing. Lucia gazed at the man, lost in her thoughts. I'm not here to play games with you, so just give it a try. As soon as the words left her lip, the man directly took the girl's hand. He pressed a kiss into her palm. The gesture was just too bold. Lucia's face turned red from embarrassment, unconsciously calling out, my Lord Duke. The man unhappily called my name. I didn't want to hear the title, my Lord Duke, anymore. You probably won't enjoy what's next, so I'll skip ahead. Just before dawn, Lucia woke up. She was startled to see the man sleeping beside her. Only then did she remember that she was already married. The intense memories just flashed in her mind. Lucia blushed again. She hurriedly turned over to get some water. As soon as her feet hit the ground, she twisted her ankle. Then, with a thud, she found herself kneeling on the floor. Lucia realized she couldn't exert any strength at all. It feels like I've been beaten up, and he clearly remembers not wearing any clothes last night. The sweat on his body is gone. It's like he just took a shower. Lucia suddenly realizes that married life is vastly different from what she imagined. She inexplicably feels a sense of being deceived. Meanwhile, Talon is awakened by some faint movements. Turning his head, he sees a pumpkin head peeking out from under the bed. Lucia was still immersed in the matters of intimacy between men and women. Suddenly, a tall figure crouched down. Lucia was so startled that she burst into a rendition of The Lonely Brave. In the next moment, she felt lighter. Lucia realized she had been picked up by a man. Lucia momentarily didn't know how to react. She anxiously looked left and right. Taran is really amazed by this little fool. You didn't see it wrong. Your husband picked you up. When Lucia heard this casual term of endearment, she couldn't help but be stunned. Her face turned red again, without her control. Taran said seriously, your sleeping position is very dangerous. You could fall off such a big bed. Lucia quickly explained that she just wanted to drink some water. As a result, her legs gave way and she fell. The man said nothing. He carried the girl to the coffee table. Then he picked up the cup of water and handed it to her. Lucia, held against his warm chest, felt somewhat anxious. Talon called to remind him not to drop the cup again this time. Lucia's face turned red again. She silently tightened her grip on the cup in her hand. After finishing the water, Talon tucked the girl into bed. He told her to sleep a little longer. They would set off to the territory later. The girl raised her hand. She brushed the loose hair off the man's forehead. Talon felt his heart skip a beat. A soft voice from the girl entered his ears. I'm sorry. Your hair is messy. As soon as the words fell, the man leaned down and kissed the girl's lips. Then he buried his face into the girl's neck, taking a deep breath with all his strength. Lucia cried out in pain. The man quickly got up and said he would call the doctor in the morning. Lucia was startled. How could she explain this to the doctor? Talon still decided to fulfill his promise and go to the territory. Lucia felt a bit at a loss. She quickly insisted that he shouldn't change his original plans because of her. Talon felt a bit guilty for a moment. He just wants the wedding. He pretended there was an emergency in the territory. At that moment, he could only rush in front of the girl. With a serious expression, he explained that it wasn't that late. A few days don't matter. He decided not to leave this morning. Then he directly tucked Lucia into bed. Let her sleep a little longer. Lucia suddenly felt that this man was not as terrifying and cold as she had imagined. But she still felt that something was off. Before dozing off, Lucia asked if she could ask a question. Taran coldly replied that she could not. But Lucia acted as if she hadn't heard and continued, after dealing with the urgent matters of the territory. Will you return to the royal city? Taran stood up and walked towards the door. It means there are many things to handle there. So he will stay there for a while. Currently, it's still unknown when he will return. Lucia recalled how the man had acted in front of him. Curiously, she asked, do you never regret the decisions you've made? The man stopped. With a blank expression, he replied, no. I don't cling to anything I've already lost. It's meaningless to be obsessed with things that cannot be changed. Saying this, Talon interrupted the girl who still wanted to chatter and urged her to sleep. Lucia called out to the man, the Duke, who was about to leave. Aren't you going to sleep? Talon patiently explained that he usually gets up around this time. And I told you not to call me Duke. Lucia looked shy, because she found it hard to say. Talon called out, Saiban, without any expression. Lucia shivered all over, because that was her nickname when she was a princess. Talon sighed. This little one really gets scared too easily. Lucia expressed that she wasn't used to being called Saiban. She hoped the Duke would call her something else. Talon immediately began to think seriously, Madam. Honey, sweetheart. Darling, Lucia is getting redder as she listens. What's going on? Why is this man so good at flirting? Just call me by my name. The man sits down by the bed. He feels the same way. Then he starts gently patting the blanket. It's obvious he's trying to lull his wife to sleep. Lucia lay in bed, not daring to move. Although she dreamed that Duke Talon said there would be no more lovers after marriage, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man must be hiding one or two somewhere, because his way of charming women was really too skilled. Just then, the man suddenly leaned down and played with her hair. Is there anything else you want to know? Lucia said, I'm sorry. I'm too loud. Sleepiness gradually overtakes me. Lucia drifts off to dreamland once again. As the girl's breathing becomes steady, Talon leans down and plants a kiss on her cheek. Watching the woman sleep, Talon feels more and more that she is magical. Is it because the girl grew up with the common people since she was little, that her eyes are so clear and bright? But she knows that these eyes will eventually become like everyone else's, filled with greedy desires. Talon strode out, while instructing Taiju to escort the lady to the territory tomorrow, and to call for the doctor, specifically emphasize the giant medicine doctor. Taiju thought it was because the lady was unwell. He was just about to call Talon to stop her. Wait until he wakes up to discuss. If he needs anything, just call. Before setting off, Talon sat on the horse's back, and told the steward word for word. He is the mistress of Talon. Take good care of him. Upon hearing this, Taiju was stunned. He had never heard his master say such things. On this side, Ergo received a task from his master. He was urgently asked to stay in the royal city as the crown prince's guard. Ergo was unwilling in every possible way. He doesn't want to stay in the capital. He wants to go to the front lines with his master. But no matter how much he throws a tantrum, his master remains indifferent. The officer can't stand it anymore, and directly gave Ergo a kick. The fat officer reminded him that he should follow his master's orders. He knows there's no room for negotiation. Ergo could only reluctantly go find the prince. Meanwhile, Lucia also woke up, but the occasional sharp pain in his body made him very uncomfortable. The old maid knocked on the door and asked if the lady needed a meal. Lucia replied that she could just have something light. Then he casually asked who the Duke was. To his surprise, he learned that the man had already set off for his territory. Lucia instantly became alert. After hearing the report from Butler Taiju, I learned that the Duke received an urgent message, which is why he set off early. Lucia was even more curious about when she could leave. Taiju told the lady that it was originally scheduled for tomorrow, but the master said there is no need to rush. The lady can leave whenever she wants. Lucia didn't want to stay long. She quickly stated that they should just follow the plan. Then, Taiju began explaining the route to the lady. The place they were going to is called Luoyan. It's not just the name of a city. It's also the name of the Duke Talon's castle, but the two locations are very far apart. If they were just to ride in a carriage, it definitely won't be reachable in less than 10 days or half a month. Taiju told the lady. This time they are using a teleporter. It will take about 4 days to get there. This was the first time Lucia heard about such a thing. Her face was filled with excitement. Taiju told the lady. The teleporter is one of the magics left by the fallen magic kingdom. Can transport objects over long distances. The reason their empire has become a powerful nation is that they possess more transporters than any other country. Duke Talon simply mentioned wanting to use Lucia as the Duchess, and she can benefit directly. After listening to Taiju's introduction, Lucia's impression of Duke Talon deepened once again. She knows the Duke is formidable, but I don't know how powerful he is. Lucia flirts with her hot face. Until now, he was a little confused about the fact that Duke Talon was his husband. This feeling is really unreal. Just then, Taiju suddenly called out to Mrs. It means that if the wife is not able to move due to physical discomfort, then I might as well call the doctor over. The awareness in the empire of needing female doctors for female patients is not very high, so there are very few female doctors in the capital. Anna was called here early in the morning, but she wasn't allowed to diagnose until the evening. Subconsciously, Anna felt that this patient would be a difficult aristocrat. However, when she met Lucia, she discovered that the patient was actually such a lovely girl. I instantly felt at ease. After the examination, it turned out to be just muscle strain. As long as you rest well, there's nothing to worry about. When Taiju clasped his hands, did you agree to be the attending physician? Anna didn't expect that a country doctor would have the chance to become a lady's family doctor. She was momentarily taken aback. After confirming the time, she agreed on the spot. Finally, the day to set off had arrived. Talon had long instructed the steward to arrange all of his itinerary. The escort team consists of skilled knights. Lucia hardly needed to worry about safety. After they arrived from the transporter, they began their journey by carriage. They traveled until evening. The convoy decided to stop and set up camp. When Lucia got off the carriage, he swayed the iron pillar. He hurriedly supported her. The lady's face looked very pale, but she never uttered a word of complaint. Annie, who was with the group, noticed the lady looked a bit unwell, so she asked if she needed some medicine. Lucia quickly replied that she was just a bit tired. There was no need for any major fuss. The starry sky. Lucia decided to take a walk, and invited Anna to join her. But the two of them didn't speak along the way. Lucia was lost in her memories. She thought of that dream again. Her life has been full of twists and turns. Now she unexpectedly appears in the Northern Territory as a duchess. This place exclusively belongs to the Talon family. Even the king has no authority to interfere in the affairs of the Northern Territories. The Duke of Talon is also known as the King of the North. However, in name, the Duke of Talon is still a subject of the king. The Talon family has no desire for independence. This is because the Talon family manages the lives of the people. They do not allow other lords to act recklessly. As a result, the lives of the people are gradually becoming more prosperous. But some nobles in the north believed that their rightful privileges had been stripped away since the death of the former Duke of Terranau. The northern nobles have always thought that the new duke is just a warrior who knows how to fight. So they planned to unite and sign a petition. Then they would present it to the king, to pull Terranau down from the position of the lord. But they never expected that the new lord of Terranau was far from being a mere rookie. He is a bloodthirsty maniac. The leading count was executed on the spot. From then on, no one could shake the position of the Talon family. The scene shifts. After a day and night of travel, the convoy finally arrived at Luoyang. Throughout the journey, Lucia didn't complain a single word. This impressed the maidens and knights greatly. Everyone felt that serving such a lady was a blessing earned over 3 lifetimes. Lucia originally wanted to greet the elders of the Talon family, but after hearing from Taiju, she learned that the previous duke and duchess had passed away long ago. The duke is now the only bloodline of the Talon family. Lucia was a bit confused. The duke clearly has a son, but she did not voice her question. While taking a shower, Lucia kept thinking about this matter. Is there some hidden plot here? There was no time to think it over. As soon as she finished her bath, Taiju took her to tour the entire castle. Upon learning that the duke's residence had a garden, Lucia became interested. He immediately expressed his desire to take a look. Taiju seemed hesitant to speak. He asked the lady not to have too high hopes. Only by seeing it can one know. This garden can't really be called a garden at all. The freely growing grass has completely covered the original appearance of the garden. It looks like it has been neglected for a long time. Taiju told the lady. This garden was built when the former duchess was still alive. But it's too large, and since no one has tended to it after the former lady's passing, that's why it has become like this now. Lucia thought that the duke didn't allow anyone to touch it. Taiju looked awkward. He awkwardly expressed that the master actually doesn't care about how the garden looks. The two of them slowly walked back. Lucia felt that now was the best time, so she voiced her inner doubts. You just said that the duke is the only bloodline of the Talon family, but doesn't the duke have a son? Upon hearing this question, Taiju's expression changed instantly. He thought this was a sensitive topic, but unexpectedly, the butler naturally told him the truth. The duke indeed has an 8-year-old son, but young Master Damien is not in Royan right now. He is at boarding school. Lucia thought it was because of her. She felt very guilty. The butler told the lady that this was something the duke decided a long time ago. Lucia finally felt relieved. She then asked when Damien would be back. She really wanted to meet the child, but she was told that the young master had not returned even once, and the duke had never visited the school. Lucia was a bit confused. She always thought the duke loved this son very much. After all, he wanted his son to inherit the title, willing to suffer for herself to sign a contract with this fallen princess. The butler noticed that the lady seemed to be deep in thought. He kindly reminded her immediately. If the lady wanted to know about the young master, it would be better to ask the master directly. Some things are not convenient for a servant to say. In the blink of an eye, it was time for afternoon dessert again. This is Lucia's favorite part. She might even skip dinner. The food at the Duke of Talon's residence is quite lavish. Brunch is relatively simple, but the variety at dinner is truly dazzling. Lucia is very worried that if she keeps eating like this, she'll become a pig. Aside from that, everyone here treats her very well. Lucia guesses they see her, a newly married lady, living alone in a strange place. Worried that he might feel uncomfortable. That's why they've been so considerate in every way. But in fact, he is adapting very well. He's enjoying his tea. Suddenly, Lucia remembers the matter of the yellow roses, and asks the butler if he has been the one handling it all along. Taiju didn't expect the lady to bring up such a sensitive topic. He slipped his hand. The teapot was thrown out directly. Lucia quickly reassured that it was fine. Then she continued the previous topic about who came up with the idea of sending roses. In his view, the Duke is not the kind of person who is detail-oriented, so he shouldn't have thought of such an idea. Taiju's heart was racing. At that moment, he didn't guess what the lady meant. I can only tighten my nerves. Lucia noticed the butler's tension. She smiled sweetly and indicated it was okay. So it was your idea. Since we're at this point in the conversation, Taiju saw no need to hide anymore. He explained that it was because his sister-in-law opened a flower shop, which is why he learned a bit about flower language. Lucia extracted the key point that you have a younger brother. He is currently serving as an aide to the Duke. Lucia thought carefully. He realized that there seemed to be many twins in the Duke's residence. As far as he knows, the head chef is a twin. There are also maids. Taiju laughed heartily upon hearing this. He blurted out that the Duke also has a twin brother. After saying this, Taiju was drenched in sweat. He regretted having such a big mouth. How could he casually reveal such a big secret? Lucia did not notice Taiju's inner turmoil, but she still cautiously asked, "Is it something I can't know?" Taiju shook his head. He indicated that the Duke's twin brother had passed away a long time ago. Although the lady will find out sooner or later, no one actually dares to bring this up lightly. Then Taiju reminded the lady that it's best not to mention this in front of the Duke. Lucia herself is not interested in this topic. She is more curious about who was the last person Taiju helped deliver yellow roses to the Duke. Taiju Alexander. It's better to continue talking about the twin brothers, Lucia said with a smile to reassure him, indicating that she meant no harm. He was just curious. Then he recounted the breakup scene he encountered while meeting the Duke that night. Taiju's face turned pale. He asked the lady how she knew. Of course, Lucia couldn't say. Actually, I overheard it myself. I only answered that I happened to know. Then, pondering, I said if the last rose was given to that young lady. What about Mrs. Lucia, who has been married 3 times? Did she not receive a yellow rose? Taiju was already on the verge of breaking down. He trembled and stated that the gentleman did not give any orders. Then he dared not say another word. Lucia let out a sigh of disappointment. So, that means the Duke is still meeting with Madame Lucien. Taiju reacted strongly. He quickly clarified for his master, no. The Duke of Latro hasn't met with him since getting married. I swear on heaven. Seeing Taiju so agitated, Lucia couldn't help but laugh out loud. It means that even if we meet, it's still possible. I don't mind. Then he thanked Taiju, thanking him for telling himself, these are to deal with the lady. Taiju felt like he was already full of holes. He inexplicably felt that the lady was terrifying. Just as Taiju let out a sigh of relief, the lady suddenly told him that she also wanted to discuss the maids, because there were so many people. Some servants had entered the manor without even seeing the lady's face. Lucia was not used to being treated so well, so she suggested to Taiju not to assign her a fixed male servant, but to have them take turns serving her. If the same person always served her, conflicts are bound to arise among the servants. Although it's not a big deal for the servants to form cliques, he worries it might lead to other problems later. Taiju has completely submitted. Now, in his eyes, the lady is like a radiant angel. On this afternoon chatting with the lady, he finds that she is not only kind and decisive, and wise. He originally thought he would only follow the Duke in this life, but he suddenly felt that the lady in front of him was also worth following. The scene shifts. At the northern consulate, the anxious Iron Pillar is following his master. Just a moment ago, Talon drove everyone out of the consulate. This time, he came to the northern territory. He wants a complete purge. But this way, talented individuals become even scarcer. Although the master has done this before, the one cleaning up after the master, Taiju, feels very exhausted. He begs the master not to randomly kill entire families anymore, but he knows, no matter how much he says, it's actually useless. Just then, the commander of the knights reported that they had captured the heir of the rebels. He is the son of the earl who led the rebellion against the chancellor. The commander told the lord that this kid is the son of Count Braun's ex-wife. He has just been in power for a little over a year. This gathering exposes being pushed out as a scapegoat. Talon pondered for a moment. Then he issued the final ultimatum, let him handle it. Taiju seemed to see the radiance of the virgin. This is the first time the master left a rebel's head, but that kid actually refused the money, and shouted at Talon, my lord Duke, kill me. The young man lowered his head. Tears fell down one by one. Charan, who is usually decisive, surprisingly asked back this time, why do you want me to kill you? The young man's tears seemed like pearls that had broken off a string. I hate the blood that flows from me. Charan clearly heard his own heartbeat. He hasn't felt this way in a long time. You have no other choice. Live with this disgust, the boy inexplicably raised his head. Talon had already turned around. Another person's image began to emerge in his mind. That was his twin brother. Because of the Blood City lineage, in the Talon family rules, one of the brothers must die in battle. The one who survives will become the heir of the Talon family. Without a doubt, Talon became the one who survived. But the twin brothers actually committed suicide for him, so this became an eternal scar that could never heal. He wishes that the one who died back then was himself. She has been keeping watch over an empty house for a month. Every midnight, she recalls the moments of hugging and lifting high with her husband on their wedding night. That day, Lucia sat in the hall drinking tea as usual. Taiju came over to ask her what she wanted for dinner. After a month of getting to know each other, Taiju had completely submitted to the Duchess. He had never seen such a gentle mistress. At first, upon learning that the Duchess was a princess, he was a bit worried, but now thinking back, it was completely unnecessary for him to worry. Just then, a strange noise suddenly came during the pouring rain. Lucia was just about to ask what the sound was, when she noticed that Iron Pillar was standing straight, looking tense. This is the first time I've seen him like this. Taiju told the lady, the Duke has returned. Now even Lucia is getting nervous. Taiju quickly informed the lady, saying there's no need to go out to welcome him, as it might startle him. The master's recent business in the territory was somewhat dangerous, so he will be very sensitive upon returning. The lord will likely go straight to bathe. You should see him after that. Lucia sat back in her original spot, nodding thoughtfully. Although she didn't know why the Duke had been gone for so long, she also didn't know what had happened in the territory, but he accidentally overheard the knight's conversation, and roughly understood it was related to the barbarians. All along, he had stayed in the prosperous imperial city, where he had experienced war only after following Talon to the north, where he truly felt the dangers of the northern territories. Lucia had not forgotten. The man who is so at ease in bed is actually a hunter who kills mercilessly on the battlefield. The scene shifts. Turan is in full armor, his cloak splattered with the blood of rebels. Taiju stands by, his heart racing. After all these years, he still cannot get used to the terrifying killing intent of his master. He's completely different from usual. Taiju thought the master would go straight to bathe, but unexpectedly, the man stopped and asked if everything was alright. Taiju instantly understood what the master meant. He hurriedly replied that the lady is doing just fine. It's my fault for not letting her come out to greet you. Talon's expression softened a bit. Good job. After saying that, he restored his spiritual power. A meeting in 1 hour. Get everyone here. Then he turned around and strode forward. Taiju has gotten used to his master's decisiveness, but the enemy isn't about to attack right away. He should at least meet with the lady first. However, the master asked about the lady as soon as he returned. This is unprecedented. Adding to the master's instructions before departure, it seems he didn't think much of it. The master should be quite fond of the current lady. Lucia can only wait eagerly. Her appetite has decreased quite a bit. After dinner, she decided to stay in the study for a while. The book in her hand was quickly finished. Lucia planned to wander around and pick another one, but this study is really too big. There are all kinds of books, and they are all neatly arranged. The only downside might be that there's no ladder. Lucia is straining on her toes, trying to take down that large red book. Completely unaware that someone is slowly approaching from behind, Talon effortlessly pulls the book out. Lucia was taken aback. Time seemed to stand still around her. In this past month, she had actually been doing well. She would only occasionally think of this man. But when Talon truly stood in front of her, Lucia felt completely overwhelmed with butterflies in her stomach. The man's voice pulled her back to reality. Lucia suddenly grabbed the book and pushed it back. She tightly covered her chest. She felt countless butterflies fluttering in her chest. The sound of her heartbeat was deafening. Lucia was thinking about how to greet the man. Talon's words echoed in her mind. It's my fault for coming to see you now. It was my mistake. Lucia quickly expressed her understanding. After all, you have a lot to deal with. Then they started awkwardly chatting about their lives over the past month. I heard that Lucia had very little for dinner today. Talon asked if it was because the head chef's cooking wasn't good. Lucia's heart was pounding. She quickly said it wasn't because of that. It's impossible to have such a good appetite every day. The man's expression darkened. He revealed that murderous glare again. Who made you unhappy? Lucia quickly turned her head away, indicating that everyone was nice to her. Seeing the woman's face getting redder, Talon probably figured out the reason. He tucked the woman's long hair back and showed it off. Lucia looked at me in surprise. She slowly turned her head to look at the man. Do you feel uncomfortable being with me? Lucia quickly shook her head. She indicated that she was just a bit at a loss. After all, they hadn't seen each other for a month. Are you complaining that I haven't seen you for a month? Lucia's face instantly turned bright red. He quickly defended himself, saying it wasn't true. The man lifted the girl's chin directly. Then he bent down and kissed her. The girl's petite height made him bend down. Lucia was lost in a kiss as the man held her in his arms. After a long time, they breathlessly looked at each other. Talon looked into the girl's tear-filled eyes and couldn't hold back anymore. He directly picked her up and walked upstairs. Lying on the bed, in the study, Lucia finally realized that she was about to be completely ravished again. Turan, at this point, could no longer control himself. He pounced and started ravaging her. Lucia pushed him away, saying she wanted to take a shower. He fled in a panic. Talon sat down on the edge of the bed. At this moment, he finally felt a bit awake. All along, he had never changed his established plan. As long as something was decided, he would definitely see it through. If things went according to plan, he should still be on the northern territory performing his duties. But I don't know what's on his mind. He unexpectedly cancelled a 6-month schedule. He returned to Luoyan ahead of time. He has to admit that while he was in the northern territories, the image of this woman frequently appeared in his mind. She has been trying hard to control herself from thinking of her, but he realized he simply couldn't do it. Talon came down from upstairs. She now had to confirm something. Why she thought of him, and why she always found it hard to let go. She picked up the book the girl was about to read. Talon began to read it carefully. In fact, he absolutely hated when others intruded into his study. But when he saw Lucia appear here, he felt no aversion at all. On the contrary, he almost lost control. Talon sat down in front of the chair and began to think about why this woman felt so special to him. Upon closer inspection, it seemed that things started to spiral out of control. The moment she agreed to marry him, Lucia is the only variable in his life. Thinking of this, the butler suddenly walked in with a tense expression. Taiju thought his master was angry about the lady entering the study. He quickly stated that it was he who told her she could come in, because his master had previously said that the lady is the mistress of the duke's residence. Seeing his master's calm demeanor, Taiju breathed a sigh of relief. Then he expressed that everyone really likes the lady. Upon hearing this, Talon became interested. A smile unconsciously spread across his face. This was the first time he heard the butler say such things. After all, in the past, Taiju's relationships with any woman were not good. Speaking of the lady's merits, Taiju began to speak endlessly. Talon didn't want to hear about his woman from another man. He directly interrupted the incessant chatter of Taiju. What is the lady doing now? The young woman had just been released from prison. She found that her husband was already waiting in the bedroom. Lucia's face instantly turned bright red. The maids promptly left the room, sensing the situation. The man was sitting on the sofa, drinking. Lucia walked over asynchronously. She thought the memories of their first night had become blurred. But as she approached the man, Lucia realized she had overthought it. He remembered all the details, even the man's warm body temperature. Talon didn't have much mental activity. He simply handed over the glass of wine. Asked the girl if she wants a drink. Lucia nodded. A little alcohol should help ease the tension. Talon hadn't had a chance to stop her. She downed it in one go. Seeing Lucia's uncomfortable expression, Talon suddenly wanted to tease her, so he picked up the bottle of red wine and handed it over. Ask him if he wants to drink more. Unexpectedly, the girl her wine glass. Lucia was already a bit dazed. The flush on her face looked very tempting. Turan turned the girl's face. He kissed her directly. The taste of red wine spread in their mouths. Lucia felt as if she was drowning. Talon leaned in close to the girl's ear and asked in a whisper like lovers, "Do you really enjoy drinking?" Lucia was already a bit tipsy and her words were slurred. She could only express, word by word, that she would drink a little on special occasions. The man let out a light laugh. He leaned down and pecked at the girl's enticing lips. Lucia's body couldn't help but start trembling. Talon comforted the girl in his arms. "Tell her not to be so nervous. Otherwise, she might get hurt." After saying that, he directly picked the girl up and walked to the bed. The two of them lay down on the bed together. Lucia leaned against the man's broad chest. Her nervousness gradually relaxed. At this moment, Taran was regretting being too indulgent on their first night. If only he had restrained himself a bit. Now this woman surely has added another item to her self-evaluation. I don't know why. He suddenly hopes that Lucia will no longer be afraid of him. It would be best if she could completely trust him, seeing that the man hasn't made any moves. Lucia thinks he doesn't want to be affectionate today. In the Empire, if a mistress wants to solidify her position, she must continuously receive her husband's favor. So he came to the bedroom today to make outsiders think their relationship is harmonious? Or is it to take care of his emotions? Just as Lucia was lost in thought, a man's voice suddenly came from above her. "You're not really going to fall asleep, are you?" "I'm not here to lull you to sleep." But in the next moment, Talon directly grabbed the girl's hand and kissed her. Then he straightforwardly said, "I want to hug you. Do you want that?" Lucia didn't expect the man to be so direct. Her face instantly turned red. Taran directly pinned her down. He repeated, "I said I want to hug you." The man's gaze was intense. Lucia felt as if he was looking at a stunning beauty. Suddenly, it didn't feel so bad. Taran emphasized that this time it would definitely not be like last time. At this point, Lucia got angry. She expressed that she didn't believe it at all. "You tricked me last time. It clearly feels different from what you said." Taran held the girl's hand, stroking his own face. With a sincere look, he said, "Please believe me one more time, okay?" Lucia suddenly felt like laughing. But in this atmosphere, it felt inappropriate. He could only tightly press his lips together. But he overestimated his endurance. The next second, the whole bedroom was filled with the girl's sweet laughter. Lucia looked at the man with passionate eyes. "Then it all depends on your performance today. The following Douyin video won't be played. Everyone can imagine it for themselves." The scene shifts. The sun is shining brightly. The girl is still half asleep. Then she suddenly wakes up with a start. Suddenly, a man behind her hugs her tightly. Lucia instinctively called out, "My Lord Duke." Talon was very displeased. With a slap, he called out my name beside the woman. Lucia gently murmured in embarrassment. Then there was another round of a duet. After the performance ended, the girl had already fallen into a deep sleep. Talon rested his head and quietly watched the girl. Then he pulled the person into his arms. He felt like he was really going crazy. After that day, Lucia would wake up every day only after the sun was high in the sky. Then she would have brunch alone. In the evening, Taran would accompany her for dinner. After the bath, they would play symphonies all night long. So repetitive. Lucia fully experienced what it meant to be in pain yet feeling joy. The maids were also more enthusiastic than usual. They would specially prepare high-neck dresses for her. Perhaps it was because of this every day. Lucia had become quite thick-skinned. But the weather was about to get warm. She still has to remind that person to leave traces in places that are not visible as much as possible. The current life is something he wouldn't have dared to imagine before he turned 12. Lucia quietly gazes out the window. The lush garden comes into view again. Suddenly, Lucia has an idea. That day, Lucia is sitting on the windowsill in a turtleneck sweater, drinking tea. Suddenly, she catches sight of that abandoned garden again. A thought suddenly crossed my mind to tend to the garden. Now, other than helping the Duke with his nucleic acid tests every day, it seems there's nothing else to do. In my dreams, if I don't work, I won't have food to eat. Which is completely different from the pampered life I have now. Thinking of this, Lucia realized she had no idea how to be a qualified duchess. Just then, Taiju suddenly came over and handed him a sealed bag. It turned out to be a large household budget. The so-called household budget is the money that the noble lady can use at her discretion. They can use this money to help their husbands with daily affairs. Taiju told the lady that as long as she doesn't exceed the budget, you can use it however you want. Lucia understood this time. Although it's called a household budget, it's actually just for his personal property. But in the end, it will probably still be used for this home. Lucia suddenly felt a heavy responsibility. That night, the two prepared to get close again. Lucia took the opportunity to bring up the idea of taking care of the garden. Talon never wastes time on such matters. He just casually told his wife that the garden belongs to the lady of the house. You can do whatever you want with it. But Lucia still had some concerns. She hadn't learned how to act as a duchess. Talon finally realized that he should find a teacher for his wife. Taran suddenly felt a bit guilty. He should have noticed these things earlier. Taran's family no longer has any elders, and Lucia doesn't have any decent relatives. Naturally, there are no opportunities for learning. Upon learning that the Duke was willing to help her find a teacher, Lucia was overjoyed. She broke into a radiant smile. Talon was stunned when he saw this. He quickly averted his gaze. He was afraid that if this continued, he would really become a beast. After their deep conversation, Talon told Lucia that once they finished with the territory matters, they would return to the capital. Lucia feels a bit dazed. According to the events in the dream, the king will pass away next year, and his brother, the crown prince, will ascend the throne as the new king. Duke Taran, as the closest ally of the new king, will naturally remain in the capital. As a result, life here in the north will come to an end. Just now, the Duke told him that once he finished with the affairs of the they would return to the capital. According to the timeline in the dream, they would encounter that woman upon returning to the capital. Although everyone in the dream said that the Duke was married to that woman by contract, the Duke himself never confirmed this rumor. So it's very likely that the rumors are false, and they actually love each other. It was his appearance that cut off this precious bond. The scene shifts. The two are dining in a restaurant. Talon tells his wife that the Countess teaching etiquette will come by tomorrow. Lucia is a bit nervous. She wants to know more details, but the Duke returned to his usual taciturn state. During this time, Lucia heard a lot about the Duke from the butler, Taiju. The only conclusion she reached was that the Duke is indeed a very indifferent person. He speaks little and acts more, although he answers every question. When asked, he never provides details. Just as Lucia was about to focus on her meal, Talon seems to see through his thoughts. He begins to actively introduce the etiquette teacher, Coulson. The Countess is known as the matriarch of high society. She lost her husband at a young age but never remarried. Instead, she raised her son all by herself. She single-handedly supports the entire Count's family. The Countess is particularly skilled in etiquette. Many noble young ladies are lining up to learn from her. Lucia listened with admiration on her face. But soon, confusion arose. Logically, the Countess should be very busy. How could she suddenly invite him to be a teacher? Talon exchanged glances with Taiju. Taiju immediately got the message. He cleared the room of all servants in 3 seconds. In an instant, the large dining hall was left with just the two of them. Lucia still hadn't reacted to what was happening. Talon continued with the previous topic. He expressed how difficult Teacher Chin was, and he put in a lot of effort. Lucia, flattered, said thank you in surprise. But after seeing the playful smile on the man's face, she always felt something was off. I don't know if it's just my illusion, but the Duke seems particularly pleased. Sure enough, the next moment she heard the man's shameless request. Just say it with your mouth. Lucia is completely falling for it now. She stands up and plants a kiss on the man's lips. Unexpectedly, the man shows a wicked smile, staring directly at her. Is that all? In the next moment, he directly bites the woman's lips. He lifts her onto the dining table. The two kiss passionately. Lucia finally realizes something is wrong. She hurriedly pushes her husband away. With a face full of fear, she asks, you wouldn't do it here, would you? Talon holds his wife tightly in his arms. Is it wrong to ask back with such a mischievous look? The girl's face instantly turned crimson. No way. Tarrant immediately put on a serious thinking pose. Then he directly pushed the person down onto the dining table. He said if Lucia could give a reasonable reason, then he would let her go. Lucia was filled with terror, thinking that the Duke really intended to have his way with her in such a place. She quickly protested strongly that it was not allowed. In a place where we are eating. Taran thought his wife looked especially cute like this. It made him want to tease her even more. What about other places? Like the hallway or the garden? Lucia's face turned redder and redder. She angrily stated that of course, it was not allowed. Talon knowingly asked why. Lucia looked at the man in front of her with a serious expression. Excitedly, she replied that others would see it. Talon began to nitpick. He suggested that if no one was watching, wouldn't it be fine? Just drive everyone out of the castle. Would that work? Lucia was asked the question and actually began to think seriously about it. If no one can see them, it does seem possible. And they are a couple. Talon looked at Lucia, who was seriously contemplating. He felt a bit embarrassed. He was just joking. The thought that the girl was actually considering the possibility made Talon's face start to heat up. Come on, he really wants to tackle that little thing. Before things get out of hand, Taran picked the person up from the dining table. Then he asked Lucia if she wanted to go for a walk. I'll go with you. Lucia quickly nodded excitedly. She showed a happy smile. Taran had to admit, every time a woman shows that kind of smile, she has an impulse to find the best things in the world for herself. The two of them stroll leisurely in the courtyard. Lucia tells the Duke that she wants to fill the garden with flowers this year. Then she starts chattering about the details. I don't know when it started. Taran heard her chattering voice. Her mood will improve. In the past, the girl would always ask him a lot of questions. But ever since their honeymoon was interrupted by him, Lucia's words have gradually decreased. Thinking of this, Talon suddenly felt a bit guilty. Although asking questions can be a bit annoying, he really hopes the girl can talk a bit more now. The man pointed to the old tree in the distance, indicating that was where it happened the first time. It must have been wonderful. The girl didn't react for a moment. Taran specifically reminded her, referring to what they had just discussed in the restaurant. The girl's face instantly flushed red. She was furious and flew off the handle. Taran grabbed the girl's hand, pulling someone into his arms, with a wicked smile. If you don't behave, I might just trip you right here. On the other side, Taiju's twin brother Ergo rushed over from the capital. Ergo originally wanted to report the situation in the capital to his master, but he found out that his master was taking a walk with his wife. Ergo was so shocked he almost fell over. He has never seen the master do such a thing. Taiju was very displeased with Ergo's reaction. He stated that the master and the lady have a very good relationship. They eat together every day. Ergo looked shocked. When did the master's taste change like this? Taiju's face was gloomy. He told his brother to shut up. Ergo was still immersed in shock. He quietly murmured that his master had never slept with the same woman more than 3 times. As soon as he finished speaking, Taiju directly punched Ergu in the abdomen. Didn't I tell you to shut up? Ergu doubled over in pain and knelt on the ground. He still stubbornly defended himself, claiming he was just speaking casually. He didn't believe that his master's relationship could last long. After all, only Madame Lucienne, who's on her 3rd marriage, and the master have been together for over a year. Maybe he's just enjoying his honeymoon period, so he wants to play around a bit more. But Ergu didn't say this out loud. If his older brother heard that, he'd probably be beaten to a pulp. After a day's travel, Ergu was already yawning incessantly, indicating that he will see the master again tomorrow. Taiju watched his brother's distant figure. He fell into deep thought. Although the master and Madame Lucy had been in contact for over a year, he could sense that the master's feelings for her were different from those for other women. The scene shifts. It is now the next day. After waiting for a long time, Lucia's etiquette teacher finally arrived. However, before Michel met Lucia, he had a poor impression of the Duchess. He had never seen a Duchess who started learning to be a hostess only after getting married. That day, he suddenly received a handwritten letter from the head of the Tarrant Duke's household. It said he was invited to teach the Duchess, but it was actually coercion. If he didn't go, the Duke of Tarrant would definitely not let him off the hook. Thus, Michelle could only go to teach etiquette. But after seeing the Duchess herself, who greeted her warmly, Michelle realized she had made a premature judgment. This Duchess was nothing like the arrogant figure she had imagined. Her words were full of the innocence of a little girl. She was quite charming. The first question the teacher asked made Lucia blush. How many times does the Duke visit in a week? Lucia blushed and found it a bit hard to speak. She turned her head, shyly indicating that her husband comes every day. Michelle smiled knowingly. At first, he was worried that the Duchess would lose herself after falling in love. But now it seems, the Duke is the one who can't extricate himself. After the lesson, Lucia decided to host a small tea party next week. But for someone with social anxiety, the pressure is immense. I didn't expect that being a Duchess would be so hard. Lucia sat in her bedroom, frowning. She decided to ask Taiju for advice later. Just then, her personal maid suddenly walked in. Hesitantly, she asked, "Are you pregnant?" "Because it's been 2 months since you last menstruated," Lucia stiffened all over. Her face turned extremely embarrassed. However, the maid did not notice the change in her expression. With a hopeful face, she asked if she should call someone to take a look. Lucia maintained her composure, saying there was no need for that. The maid thought it would be safer to call a doctor. Lucia abruptly interrupted, saying it was unnecessary. I know my body best. That's impossible. It's the first time I've seen the Duchess so angry. The maid was a bit scared. She hurriedly retreated from the room. Meanwhile, Taran is working in the study. He learns that Lucia is preparing for tomorrow's tea party. The man rarely shows a smile. Taiju took the opportunity to ask his master if he wanted to give the lady a gift. Talon hesitated for a moment. He seemed to be considering the feasibility of this action. Taiju quickly added that the lady would definitely be very happy. Suddenly, the image of Lucia's beaming smile appeared in his mind. Friend, this gift must be given. But soon a new problem arose. He seems to have never given Lucia a gift. He has no idea what she likes. All the women he dated before only gave jewelry, nothing but jewelry. But Lucia seems completely uninterested in those things. Seeing his master looking distressed, Taiju smiled with relief. It was the first time he had seen his master so defeated. Suddenly, there was a knock on the study door. The moment the door was opened, Taiju's expression changed dramatically. He quickly turned around to inform his master that Dr. Philip had arrived. Upon hearing that name, Talon's face instantly darkened. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Taiju was so frightened he didn't dare to speak. Philip was loyal to the Talon family. But during the time the Duke left the territory, he suddenly disappeared. He reappeared 6 months later. As soon as he heard Philip's name, Talon's expression instantly darkened. He immediately issued an ultimatum, stating that no one was allowed to enter the building. Taiju was intimidated by his master's killing intent. He quickly bowed respectfully and withdrew. But he always felt that there was something unusual about his master's relationship with this attending doctor. As soon as the man entered, he greeted him casually, saying it had been a long time. You've grown up. Talon asked expressionlessly if Philip had finished greeting him. If you're done, then get lost. There's no need to see me again. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Philip pretended not to hear. He was lost in thought, commenting that the young master was still the same. He actually still kept this old man's face. Talon sneered. Then he said darkly, don't get it wrong. I won't kill you because I owe you a life. It's because your twin brother said he would protect his lifesaver. Speaking of this, a layer of sadness finally appeared on the man's carefree face. Philip slowly spoke, saying he sacrificed himself for you. Talon does not need anyone to decide his relationship with Shio. He simply expressed with a serious face that he never made him do that. The Talon family suddenly welcomed a pair of twins. This is unprecedented. But there can only be one heir. So the former duke sold one of his sons into servitude. The remaining one was raised as the heir. At that time, Talon was the one who was abandoned. Before the other two sons grew up, the Duke found that the heir, Hugo, was too indecisive. Meanwhile, the son who was sold into servitude was gaining more and more fame, so he wanted to switch the identities of the two sons, to avoid being discovered by outsiders. The fates of the two boys were bound together from that moment on. In order to make things easier for Shiogu, he immediately accepted his education, presenting himself with the noble demeanor of a duke. And Shiogu, in turn, also gave up everything his father had created for him. But Shiogu did not want to see his brother being used and bound. In that deep winter, he killed the Duke and Duchess. Then he ended his life right beside them. In one night, the entire Talon family was left with just him. Talon recalled the scene at that time, and felt his heart wrenched with pain. Shiogu, a person who wouldn't even dare to kill a bug, actually did such a thing for him. The reason he can sit in this position now, is all thanks to the blood shed by Shiogu. So he is waiting for Mion to grow up. As soon as he reaches the right age, he will immediately pass the title to him. The family doctor is surprisingly interested in the master's wife, especially after hearing that the lady is unable to conceive. Philip cannot wait to express his desire to meet her. Talon looks gloomy, his eyes filled with killing intent. The man warns coldly, try getting any closer to him. Philip is startled. He was just joking around. He didn't expect the young master to react this strongly. It's the first time he has seen him show such an expression over a woman. Meanwhile, Lucia is taking a walk in the garden. Suddenly, someone calls out to her from behind. It's Taiju and the maid from the bedroom. It turns out the maid was worried, so she told the butler about it. After hearing this, Taiju quickly brought people to find the lady. Lucia glanced at the maid lightly, and the maid was instantly scared to not look directly at the lady. Lucia sternly told Taiju, I'm not pregnant. There are no problems with her health. All the dukes are aware of this. But Taiju still couldn't relax. After all, if something happened to the lady's health, they definitely couldn't bear the consequences. He asked if he could confirm this matter with the Duke. Lucia's mind was in a state of chaos at this moment. After all, he had told the Duke from the beginning that he couldn't get pregnant. Although the man didn't react at the time, if he knew he was being lied to, he would feel even more embarrassed. Lucia told Taiju that the Duke really does know about his condition. If you don't believe me, I can tell him again in front of you. Taiju breathed a sigh of relief, then apologized to the lady. I didn't mean to be so aggressive. Lucia said she could understand. After all, it's his job. But that child. Lucia directed her gaze towards the iron pillar next to you. Then she coldly accused, since you didn't say a word, you went straight to him. I don't want someone who monitors me to be around. Let him go today. After saying that, she turned and left directly. Taiju glanced faintly at the person beside him. He finally reacted. The maid's behavior was indeed different. It's surprising that someone as a lady would come to report to him, a steward. Isn't this placing him above the lady? The maid lost her job. At this moment, he was already trembling in fear. Taiju looked at the lady's departing figure. He was also slightly surprised. He had originally thought the lady was an incredibly gentle person. He didn't expect her to be so heartless to this extent. This appearance was almost identical to that of the Duke. As he thought about it, Taiju revealed a relieved smile. They really are a perfect match. Philip thinks that Talon's son, Damien, needs a lady. This means Talon must have another daughter with his wife to be his son's wife. Talon stood up and slammed the table. He was fed up with these disgusting customs. Even the barbarians do not marry their own sisters. As a noble Talon family, yet this bad habit continues to this day. Philip devoted his whole life to the Talon family. He has always been a very traditional person at heart. He believes that the noble bloodline of the Talon family must be preserved. Talon impatiently rubbed his forehead. He told Philip to quickly find a quiet place to stay. If you appear in front of me again, I will definitely kill you. As soon as Philip left, Talon immediately called in the Iron Pillar. He strictly prohibited Philip from approaching the lady. He knew that Philip couldn't do anything to Lucia right now, but that old man was very likely to continue the bloodline. This kind of reasoning could encourage Lucia to find herself a lover. Although Lucia probably wouldn't believe such nonsense, there was still a possibility that it would make her sad. He didn't want to see those eternally curved pumpkin eyes stained with the slightest hint of sadness. Taiju asked if they should tell the lady about this, but he was immediately vetoed by Turun. People often become curious about things that are still. Finally, the day of Lucia's first tea party had arrived. To everyone's surprise, the atmosphere on site was very harmonious. It was completely different from the tense feeling in the capital's social circle. Everyone is saying nice things. Lucia quickly realizes. This might be because he is Lady Turung's husband. So this is the social privilege of the Northern Dominator's woman. It feels quite nice. When she was still the Countess in her dreams, she had never hosted a party. Her incompetent husband would only force her to attend social events. Yet he has never provided any financial support. So she is always the one treated with cold eyes at the tea party. Just as Lucia was deep in thought, Taiju suddenly pushed the door open and walked in. He indicated that the Duke had a gift for the lady. Lucia was taken aback. She never expected that the Duke would actually give her a gift. Amidst the gasps of everyone, basin after basin of various fresh flowers were brought into the venue. After several trips, the entire venue was surrounded by flowers. It was as if they were bathing in a sea of blossoms. The ladies cast envious glances, praising the Duke for being so romantic. Taiju smiled and told the ladies that he hoped this gift would match today's theme. Lucia held the most special flower in her hands. She shyly lowered her head, indicating that she would personally thank the Duke. After the tea party ended, Lucia gave each lady a bouquet of roses. And so, the first tea party concluded amidst laughter and joy. Taiju's mood was also lifted, and he hurriedly congratulated the lady for hosting a successful tea party. Lucia felt very pleased, but the questions that need to be asked still have to be asked. These flowers were actually not sent by him, right? Taiju was taken aback. He couldn't help but feel tense. Lucia looked at Taiju's intense reaction. She couldn't help but laugh. Then she said that she initially thought it was from the Duke too. But after hearing the blessing that Taiju conveyed, he immediately noticed. These flowers must have been sent on someone else's behalf. Dukes aren't that meticulous. Taiju was already so scared he was sweating. He stammered, trying to explain for his master. But his speech system suddenly malfunctioned. He couldn't get out a complete sentence for a long time. Actually, Lucia had no intention of blaming him at all. On the contrary, she was very happy. She smiled brightly and thanked Taiju. Taiju's mind was racing. She couldn't afford to incur the wrath of her husband. That kind of sweet but deadly smile. If the master found out, her career would be over. The master really wants to give you a gift, but doesn't know what to give. That's why I chose to paint. Lucia was a bit surprised. He originally thought the idea of giving gifts was entirely managed by Taiju. Seeing Taiju trying hard to speak for the Duke, Lucia suddenly wanted to tease him. So he showed a skeptical expression. When Taiju saw it, he almost cried out of fright. Lucia couldn't hold back any longer and burst into laughter. She then indicated that she understood. I will be sure to thank the adult properly. After the meeting that day, Talon prepared to find the wife he had been thinking about. Taiju sensed his master's thoughts, and reminded him that his wife had just finished the tea party. She is now on the terrace. Talon only heard a beautiful rumble in his mind. He was too busy with the meeting. He forgot all about the gift. Talon had to console himself. As long as the gift was delivered today, it would count. Taiju had long anticipated that the Duke would forget, so he told his master that he had taken the initiative to send some flowers. Talon instantly breathed a sigh of relief. I have to say, his personal butler really came through at a critical moment. He then walked towards the terrace, feeling a sense of relief. As soon as he arrived, he saw the girl quietly sitting at the table, leaning on her arms. She seemed to be deep in thought. Unknowingly, Talon also stopped in his tracks, and quietly leaned against the door, watching the girl. He didn't know why, but seeing Lucia wear a look of deep contemplation, made him feel a heaviness in his heart. Just then, Lucia, who had been lost in her own world, also noticed him. Talon immediately broke into a radiant smile. She ran towards the man, lifting her skirt. The sun was setting. She was enjoying this peace on the fragrant terrace. But as she turned her head, she saw her. Lucia didn't know how to describe this feeling. It was as if all the beauty in the world had suddenly descended upon her. It made her so happy that she felt faint. Looking at the girl who actively jumped into his arms, Talon was momentarily stunned. Because her action was truly adorable, Talon thought he must have learned this at the tea party. If that's the case, he suddenly felt that having a tea party every day wouldn't be so bad. Thinking of this, Talon unconsciously held the girl tighter. Then he pressed a deep kiss on her forehead. The two shared a tender glance. They began to take turns doing the nucleic acid test. After a long while, they finally separated. Talon, with a beaming smile, asked Lucia if she enjoyed the tea party. Lucia nodded eagerly. She then expressed her thanks for the gift he gave her. Although both knew what was really going on, the gift was prepared by butler Taiju. Talon lifted the girl's chin, about to continue what he had just started. Suddenly, he caught sight of the roses on the table. The man's expression changed. A phrase suddenly flashed through his mind. It was something Lucia had said to him when they were signing the contract. Talon suddenly picked up the girl and walked towards the table. During this time, he carefully looked around again. Fortunately, he didn't find the yellow rose. He sat down at the edge of the table with Lucia in his arms. Talon asked her if she particularly liked painting. Lucia honestly replied that she didn't. It's because this is a gift from you. That's why I like it. Today is Lucia's first tea painting event. It was very successful. Lucia has been in a good mood all day. but Talon feels the opposite. Seeing the room full of roses, Talon's mind begins to recall those moments of giving yellow roses, and the two additional requests he had Lucia make at that time. One is to never interfere in his private life. The second is to absolutely never fall in love with him. Now, thinking back on these two requirements, Talon shows a wicked expression. He thinks of himself back then as a madman. Every time he recalls Lucia smiling brightly and saying she would absolutely never love him, his heart feels like it's being torn apart. In these past few months of getting along, he had unknowingly fallen in love with this woman long ago. Turan rested his head on the girl's shoulder. He cursed himself for being such a fool. Lucia noticed Turan's unusual behavior. She quickly turned around and asked if something was wrong. Seeing the worry in the girl's eyes for him, Turan had never felt so foolish. But just thinking that the girl in front of him did not love him, Talon buried his head again. Scenes of other women saying they loved him began to surface in his mind. So was he expecting Lucia to entangle herself with him like the other women? Suppose Lucia really did that. Then he would be violating the contract. Talon's heart suddenly skipped a beat. It seemed they had never mentioned anything about breaking the contract. Moreover, Lucia's two requests were just verbal agreements. According to the laws of the Empire, unwritten contracts are not legally binding. Moreover, he had clearly informed Lucia at the time that the Talon family absolutely does not allow divorce. Thinking of this, Talon let out a sigh of relief. It seems he was indeed quite foresight. Her mood visibly improved. When she's in a good mood, she can't help but tease the one in her arms. Talon told Lucia that if she was satisfied with the gift he gave, she should at least return the favor. Lucia looked at the thick-skinned man in front of her with displeasure. This gift was clearly prepared by Taiju. Doesn't his conscience hurt at all? But she still asked him what he wanted. The man looked flustered. Will you agree to whatever I want? Lucia knew he must have a lot of bad ideas bottled up inside. She could only offer what was within her capability. Talon leaned in and whispered some lewd words into the girl's ear. Lucia's face instantly turned bright red. Then a punch landed on the man's chest. Demedalan then deceived, saying I will be quick. While saying that, he directly started to act. Lucia weakly resisted. Dinner time is almost here. The man, in a state of confusion, stated he would finish before then. Lucia didn't believe this man's nonsense. The Duke used to say the same thing. As a result, he gets worn out every time. Talon directly picked up the girl and turned her around. The two instantly faced each other. This position was simply too embarrassing. Lucia's face turned completely red. She didn't dare to move at all. She could only protest softly, asking what they would do if someone came. Talon thought his wife's shy appearance was just too adorable, unable to help but embrace the person. Then softly and gently comforted, stating that Taiju wouldn't be so blind, seeing that they hadn't gone out. Surely he wouldn't let outsiders in. But it was precisely like this that Lucia felt even more embarrassed. However, the man had already begun to get hands on. Lucia is a bit angry. This man is just asking symbolically. Sure enough, Talon showed a sly smile. He said he actually wanted to go to the garden just now, but considering the weather, there would be bugs in the garden. And if his wife fainted again like last time, then things would get complicated. After thinking it over, the terrace is the best choice. So what if I don't send yellow roses? So what if I do send yellow roses? Anyway, this woman will always belong to him. The scene shifts. On a clear and bright day, Taiju still called the family doctor Anna for his wife. He learned that his wife had just ended her period last month. Aside from physical and mental fatigue, there are no other pregnancy symptoms. Anna concludes that the lady is not pregnant. All she needs is some medicine to restore her health. Then Anna reveals a sharp expression, believing the lady's exhaustion is due to other reasons. Taiju immediately becomes anxious. However, what Anna says next makes everyone present blush. You two are inseparable. Although it's a good thing, everything should be measured. Madam, you are in the prime of your life. Yet you have to start taking supplements. Saying this, Anna asked the butler to remind the master to restrain himself. Then she looked at the madam, and suggested that she talk to her husband as well. You must be having a hard time too. Lucia clenched her fists. After hesitating for a moment, she shouted, I like her. She cuddles with me every day. Her voice was so loud that Anna even felt like she heard an echo. Taiju was also startled, looking at the lady in shock. However, the person involved has already shed tears of regret. Lucia didn't even know how she spoke those words. Lucia walked alone to the windowsill to clear her mind. The word pregnant felt very distant to her. In the prophetic dream she had at the age of 12, there was a kind of wild grass in the capital. It was called three-leaf mugwort. Crushed and applied to the wound, it can stop the bleeding. But the effect is minimal. It is generally not used for medical purposes. Only civilians would gather it as a backup medicine. When he was a child, he scraped his knee. The maid would use mugwort to help stop the bleeding. At 15, he left the nest for the first time. But no one ever told him what to do. Seeing the blood all over the bedsheets, he was utterly at a loss. At one point, he thought he was going to die. The maid just disdainfully took away the sheets and didn't tell him what it was. Desperate, Lucia thought of mugwort. She swallowed it blindly, trying to stop the bleeding. Surprisingly, it actually worked. From then on, whenever she bled, she would take mugwort. She continued for half a year. Lucia found that she no longer bled. At that time, she didn't know what it meant. Until later, when she married Count Maidon, he only learned the fact that he was infertile from the doctor. To him at that time, it was simply a blessing. He would rather die than give birth to a son or daughter for an aging, decrepit family. It wasn't until the end of that tragic marriage that Lucia began to seek treatment options. However, every doctor who understood his symptoms expressed helplessness. In their eyes, mugwort is a poisonous herb. Eating too much can cause fatal harm to the body. Just when he was about to give up, a healer suddenly appeared in the village. Everyone said he was highly skilled. His methods were unusual. Lucia decided to give it one last try. After pushing open that rickety door, he saw the oilskin coat. Although worn and tattered, it had an elegant demeanor. I heard that Lucia has stopped menstruating. The man showed no signs of confusion at all, but instead appeared very interested. When he heard Lucia ask if it could still be cured, the man burst into laughter. Then he got up and took out a prescription. He asked him to take it once a month according to the prescription. He could stop once he recovered. As for the claim that mugwort is poisonous, he completely disagreed. Mugwort just has a strong effect, and can easily cause side effects. For example, the amenorrhea symptoms that Lucia experienced. Before leaving, Yui reassured him, may you have a beautiful child, and become a happy mother. After Lucia woke up from her prophetic dream, she experienced her first period again. But this time she was very calm. She clearly knew this was not an illness, and she would not die. but her heart remained unsettled. Because at that time, she always felt her future would be just like in the precognitive dreams. Tragic and painful. Dark and hopeless. She was just a forgotten princess, unable to change her circumstances. Lucia couldn't imagine giving birth to a child for that scoundrel. Although considering that man's abilities, the likelihood of them having children is quite low, Lucia doesn't want to take any risks. Moreover, she has already become familiar with the prescription from her prophetic dreams, and can treat herself at any time. So Lucia decided to take mugwort again, to make herself infertile. But now, through a twist of fate, she has become the Duke of Talon. The lady told the Duke at that time that she was infertile, believing that they would eventually divorce. And Turan only needed a nominal hostess at that time. But now it seems that the course of events has unknowingly gone off track. But Lucia has already made up her mind not to let children come into her life. Thinking this way, it seems a bit like letting down that blessing from UE. Lucia suddenly realized she had forgotten the name of that oilskin. After thinking hard for a while, Lucia exclaimed. She remembered. That oilskin is called Philip. The scene shifts. In the study, Talon instructed the butler not to let the Duke's residents have roses anymore. Taiju was very puzzled, but he instinctively said hello. At that moment, Taiju suddenly remembered the question the lady had asked a few days ago about the yellow rose. He quickly brought up the matter. He informed his master. He also mentioned the lady's question. That is, why the last person to receive flowers was not Madame Lucienne. Taiju looked at his master's expression, weakly indicating that he had said there were no orders from the adults at the time. Upon hearing this, Talon's expression darkened immediately. He then directly exploded in anger. He shouted, "How could you answer him like that?" Taiju was so scared that cold sweat broke out. The master's gaze looked like it was spewing fire. "If you send it over today, just send it." Taiju quickly responded. Then he weakly mentioned that there was one more thing. The man impatiently tugged at his hair. "Why are there so many things today?" Taiju steeled himself and conveyed what Dr. Anai had asked him to tell his master. "I hope you can exercise some restraint. Please don't frequently visit the lady's bedroom. For the health of the lady and the family, the doctor strongly advises His Grace the Duke to exercise restraint. It's best to take a break every 5 days." That night, the young couple cuddled together, drifting off to sleep. Talon told his wife that he would be leaving the castle tomorrow to inspect the territory for a few days. Moreover, he would need to go once or twice every month afterward. Lucia lifted her head, clearly unhappy. "I don't understand why the Lord would do such a thing." In the prophetic dream, when she married Count Maidon, she never saw him patrol the territory. Just thinking about not seeing the Duke for 3 or 4 days makes Lucia a little reluctant. I don't know when it started, but she has gotten used to having the Duke by her side. Talon held the girl in his arms. He mentioned the tea party in 2 days. He had prepared a gift again. As soon as Lucia heard this, her heart uncontrollably raced. Then she curiously asked what the gift was. The man blurted out, "A necklace." Lucia was momentarily at a loss for how to respond. He really didn't expect the Duke to confess so easily. It was truly a surprise. Talon thought it was because Lucia didn't like it. After receiving a definite answer, the man advised not to run around just because I'm not here. Stay put and wait for my return. You know, Talon emphasized one point particularly. That is, no going out. Lucia had a look of shock on her face. Although she was a homebody herself, she had hardly ever stepped outside since coming here. But she didn't understand why the Duke had to emphasize one point. Talon gently caressed the girl's delicate cheek, and in a whispering tone meant for lovers, he softly said, "Because I don't want you to leave my domain while I'm away. When I'm not here, the mistress must protect the castle." Lucia had no doubts at all, and revealed a signature smile. She asked the Duke if he had any further instructions. Talon lifted the girl's chin. Just thinking about not seeing that smile for several days made him uncontrollably miss her. If longing had a sound, it would surely collapse the formation. Turan found that he seemed unable to live without him. Early the next morning, Turan set off in a carriage. Philip, who was wandering nearby, noticed the commotion, and wanted to check the situation in the inner city. However, before he could get close to the city gate, he was subdued by 2 knights. The knights told Philip, as long as he doesn't enter, they won't restrict any of his actions. Philip shouted in confusion, asking why they had to do this. What is the reason? The son of a wealthy tycoon carefully selected a gift for his wife. In the end, he set his sights on a necklace bought by a foreign royal family. Without a word, Turan immediately ordered the butler to find that royal family. Offer them double or triple the price. I don't believe they won't sell. The Talonism is set. He feels this necklace was made for Lucia by nature. However, when Lucia actually receives the necklace, her feelings are quite complex, because this necklace is too gorgeous and too precious. She has never worn such a dazzling necklace in her life. Although everyone says he is very suited for it, he initially thought the Duke's pendant was a small and understated necklace, not something that sparkles like a royal heirloom. It shines wherever it goes. Lucia uncertainly asked Taiju, "Did the adult really buy this necklace as a gift for me for the tea party?" Taiju nodded eagerly, and went on to explain in detail the hardships the master faced to acquire this necklace. Hearing the lady say this gift is extravagant, Taiju lamented endlessly. This is a gift that the master put a lot of thought into choosing. He has never seen the master do something like this before. Taiju reassured the lady that she need not feel any psychological burden, because his master is least lacking in money. However, to Lucia, the more extravagant the gift, the more it is mentioned in front of the Duke, the less it matters. Lucia couldn't help but start to overthink. The figure who wanted to give her this necklace, could it be to repay her? Because he likes to be close to her, or has he just gotten used to giving gifts? After all, he has had many lovers in the past. The more Lucia thought, the more conspiratorial it seemed. I can only force myself to calm down. He originally thought that after marrying Duke Talon, he would live a very lonely life, but unexpectedly, he feels happier each day. Although the man speaks indifferently, and never says sweet nothings, he is always considerate towards her. He is completely different from the rumors, but they had already agreed that they would never fall in love with each other. Yet Lucia felt like she had already fallen. Every time the man fantasized about tightly holding her, she would start to uncontrollably feel her heart race. Lucia felt completely captivated by this necklace. All along, he had been constantly hinting to himself not to get too lost in this sweet trap. As long as he remained clear-headed, even if he receives yellow roses then, he won't cling to them like those noble ladies. Besides, Tarlon is a noble who understands etiquette. His closeness to himself could very well be a sign of respect for his wife. Perhaps he misunderstood the situation. Lucia clutched her heart, constantly giving herself psychological hints. As long as I don't waver, and don't cross the line, I can keep living with him. After holding 108 tea parties, Lucia finally felt a hint of fatigue. Just as she was seeing off a group of wealthy ladies, she suddenly heard light footsteps behind her. Lucia turned around and saw a person with fair skin. The girl with the curly hair is smiling at herself. Lucia is wondering which family she belongs to. The girl has already taken the initiative to introduce herself. Her name is Katie. Mrs. Michelle is her grandmother. Lucia suddenly remembers that Mrs. Michelle had once given her a lesson, and had praised her granddaughter as a spirited little firecracker. They said they would become great friends. Unexpectedly, Katie was left bewildered. His grandmother had never praised him. She would always glare at him with a fierce expression. Seeing Katie's vivid expression, Lucia burst out laughing. She quickly comforted Katie, saying that Mrs. Mitchell must have done that out of her affection for him. The two girls exchanged glances. They all laughed in unison. Then Katie took the initiative to reach out her hand to Lucia. Lucia was attracted by Katie's lively and straightforward nature. She felt that this girl radiated a dazzling light. Thus, the two became good friends. Katie often came to Luoyen to hang out with her. They were each other's first friends of the same age, so there's always endless conversation. That night, Lucia and the Duke had a duet. Afterwards, Lucia leaned against the man's embrace. She talked about what Katie said to him in the afternoon. Talon's mind flashed to the girl's background. She was the daughter of the Milton family. The Earl of Milton was upright and honest. His children were also well educated, so he didn't inquire about Lucia's friendships. As long as he could be happy in the north, that was enough. Lucia told the Duke that Katie asked him if it was because the Duke hated him going out, that he wasn't allowed to leave. Lucia lay in the Duke's arms and said to him, "Adults aren't like that." Charon looked displeased. "I didn't expect Miss Milton to be quite perceptive. He really does hate it when his wife goes out." Lucia mentioned to the Duke that Katie invited her to go riding. Speaking of riding, the girl's eyes were filled with longing. Because Katie said riding is a lot of fun, Charon told his wife that riding is very dangerous. In fact, she didn't want other men to see Lucia riding. But as soon as he saw the girl looking so pitiful, especially with those watery eyes, he wanted to agree to everything. Charon immediately held himself back, so he didn't say the words of agreement. And before that, Charon had made Lucia promise. "I can only practice horseback riding in the castle. He will help him find a coach." Just to clarify, it's a female coach. Lucia happily jumped into the man's arms. Talon embraced the girl. He found himself increasingly at a loss with her. Soon, the women's riding arena will be open, and Lucia is becoming more and more skilled. Katie was full of excitement. She expressed that Lucia would definitely shine at that time. But at the same time, Katie felt a bit puzzled. There had never been a female-only horse racing venue before. Yet, right when Lucia was selecting her horse, the venue was built. Katie suddenly had a chilling thought. That night, the couple was again being affectionate. Lucia told the Duke that Katie invited her to go boating in 4 days. Charon was not very keen to agree. It didn't sound safe. But Lucia was full of anticipation, repeatedly assuring that there would definitely be no boating accidents. So the next morning, the Milton family received a handwritten letter from the Duke. The daughter of Earl Milton and Lady Harley stated that a notice to regulate public morals had been issued in town. It aims to restrict boating on the lake, although it's not much different from now. There are specific days when only women are allowed to enjoy the lake. The restriction day happens to be on the day Katie and Lucia planned to go out. The more Katie thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. A troubling thought flashed through his mind. Could Lucia be imprisoned? But he clearly looked very happy. To validate his thoughts, Katie came up with a brilliant idea. So for the next consecutive week, Katie told Lucia something new every day. In the evenings, Lucia always sought the Duke's opinion. Katie's laughter became increasingly wild. Charon's face grew darker by the day. A week later, Charon would tremble at the very mention of Miss Milton's name. To be honest, he seemed to show signs of stress. That day, Lucia told him Katie invited her to go hunting in the grove. He really wants to go take a look together. Talon thought seriously for a moment. If it's just that small area, it can indeed be cordoned off for control. But he needs to check first. If there are only women there, is it safe enough? Lucia blinked her eyes. She looked at her husband with a pitiful expression. Is it not possible? Talon was about to go crazy. The girl instantly became happy. She jumped into the man's arms. "Thank you, Talon. I was nearly driven mad by that Miss Milton." That night, Lucia told him she wanted to celebrate her friend Katie's birthday. Going to a pajama party tonight. Spending the night there. Charon's face darkened immediately. He sternly told Lucia that she is a married woman and still wants to go out. Lucia showed a disappointed expression. She dejectedly said she would come back after the party. Charon felt a bit complicated. Lucia is always like this. As long as it's something she disallows, she will simply give up. She never asks him. Speaking of which, Talon has never seen him ask for gifts from her. But the more Lucia does this, the more it gives him a headache. He couldn't wait for Lucia to spend all his money. It would be great if she asked him for gifts every day. Talon sighed in frustration. "If I compromise again, I will send a carriage to pick you up. You need to be home before noon." As soon as Lucia heard this, a bright smile instantly appeared on her face. Talon pretended to be unhappy, leaving his husband alone at home. "Are you still this happy?" Lucia seemed a bit confused. She mentioned that she was only going for a day. Then she brought up Charon's previous inspection of the territory. He was gone for 3 or 4 days. Charon immediately applied double standards. "That's different. That was work for me." Lucia couldn't argue against Charon. She could only pout in displeasure and accuse him of being unreasonable. The man laughed out loud. The two of them started bickering again. They sang through the night. Lucia couldn't hold on any longer and fell asleep. The man looked at the sleeping girl in his arms. A smile curved at the corners of his mouth. "Just a few weeks ago, I was complaining about the heat and couldn't sleep well. Now I'm sleeping so soundly even with a blanket covering me." The man's expression changed. He suddenly realized that summer was coming to an end. All along, he felt that time was passing too slowly. But he didn't know when it started. Time began to pass more and more quickly. The scene shifts. Lucia is wandering around the garden. After months of care, the once desolate garden has come back to life. Talon stands on the windowsill, gazing dreamily at his wife. Suddenly, Taiju walks over. The teacher wants to report on the lady's condition. In fact, Taiju has wanted to say this for a long time, but he noticed that ever since his master married the lady, it's like he has become a different person. From the once rebellious and carefree playboy, to now only having eyes for his lady. Every time his master is with the lady, he is always staring intently at her. That gaze is really too naked. The male lead arranges for the butler to monitor his wife. Every night, Taiju has to report to his master about the lady's daily activities. But Taiju has actually been hiding something, a secret about the lady's health. But he has been hesitating whether he should let the lady tell the master herself. The lady had previously promised him that she would talk to the master, but afterwards, he still remained silent. Taiju also has his own responsibilities. His duty is to ensure his master's health. So he decided to tell the truth to his master. But when he faced the adult, Taiju hesitated a bit. Seeing him stammer, Talon became a little impatient. Hurry him up, let it out quickly. The lady has not had her period. Then she mentioned the previous misunderstanding about the lady's pregnancy. Moreover, she emphasized again, the lady said you already knew. Talon's pupils contracted. Suddenly, he thought of the time when the two signed the contract. Lucia once said that she couldn't get pregnant. But at that time, he didn't take it to heart. Because whether Lucia could get pregnant didn't matter. Anyway, she could never have a child. But now, when Talon hears this, it's like a bolt from the blue. She feels a bit dazed. There's a trace of indescribable sadness in her heart. But the man did not show it. He only asked indifferently what the attending physician was doing. Taiju quickly explained, Madam's symptoms are not outwardly apparent. If Madam does not speak, the doctor cannot make a diagnosis. Talon's face darkened. Tell him to go get the doctor right now. The man leaned alone against the railing, and began to reflect on his journey of the heart. Lucia was the perfect person he dreamed of marrying. She never annoyed him, and never demanded anything from him. His understanding of his wife was all based on the butler's reports. It was then that Talon understood. He really doesn't understand Lucia's thoughts at all. They seem so affectionate. Even in bed, they are so in sync. But they never seem to have truly connected. Lucia has never opened her heart to him. Every time he sees the girl smile, he mistakenly believes that Lucia has entrusted everything to him. But in reality, there's a huge gap. Thinking of this, Talon asked the butler for his wife's expense details. After being married for so long, Lucia's expenses only amounted to 3 nights. Talon took a look, and furrowed his brows, because it only recorded the costs of maintaining the garden, and the expenses for tea and flowers. That is to say, Lucia has never had any personal expenses. That's quite unusual. When asked if his wife had never even bought new clothes, Taiju replied to the adults, My lady has always been in front of the river, wearing dresses left by the duchesses, and jewelry passed down through the generations of the Talons. The lady will pick out some dresses, and alter them before wearing. The jewelry will be used and then returned to the collection room. Talon looked at the few bills, and said nothing. He only felt a tightness in his chest. He was very angry, but he didn't understand why. In theory, this is exactly the marriage life he has always hoped for. A calm and uneventful marriage. A well-behaved wife who knows her place. He agreed to this arrangement precisely because he didn't want to take on the duties of a husband. That's why he consented to this deal. He signed the contract. Lucia had told her from the beginning that she only needed the title of a duchess. She thought that Lucia would become obsessed with being a jack of all trades after getting married, but it seems she only just realized now. The girl actually didn't care about any of this from the beginning. And for her, it was actually a loss avoided. Logically, she should be happy about it. But why is she so troubled? Over here, Lucia, who was wandering in the garden, glanced towards the balcony. He noticed that the Duke, who had just been standing there, was now nowhere to be seen. He couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness in his heart. In fact, he came to the garden not to tend to the flowers and plants, but to steal a glance at the Duke. Previously, he had accidentally seen the Duke standing on the balcony in the hallway. That was when he realized the balcony faced the garden. Although they were under the same roof, he always felt that the Duke was out of reach, because he is really too busy. They can only meet during dinner. Seeing the scene, Lucia suddenly realized he could use gardening as an excuse, and then openly spy on him. But when he actually stood in the garden, he found that his nerve wasn't thick enough. Lucia completely dared not to look back at him, waiting for him to be mentally prepared to turn around. She found that the man was no longer on the balcony. She knew the Duke was busy, so it was impossible for him to stare at the garden all day. But when she saw the empty balcony, she still felt a little disappointed. Just as she was lost in thought, the maid by Turan's side walked over. She asked the lady to go in with him. Lucia realized when she reached the hall that things were not that simple. The family doctor and Duke Turan were sitting seriously, while Iron Pillar stood aside, looking a bit at a loss. Lucia now understood that Iron Pillar had informed the Duke about the situation. Just as Lucia was hesitating, Turan got up and walked over to her. The man extends his hand. Lucia is momentarily stunned. She places her hand on top of his. Turan's expression darkens. He abruptly grabs the girl's hand. He strides towards the sofa. Once they sit down, Dr. Anna begins to ask the lady about her symptoms, but Lucia didn't want to tell the truth. Infertility was a result of her own choice. She didn't want to drag others down. Just then, Turan's cold voice came through, telling the doctor to explain the situation. Lucia was startled, because the man's eyes were incredibly cold at that moment. She could only come up with a random lie. It indicates that she took the wrong medicine when she left the nest. For the subsequent problems, Lucia just dealt with them by saying she forgot. This left Anna in a cold sweat. Talon quietly glanced at the girl beside him. Then he said, everyone go out. He wanted to have a private chat with Lucia. In the spacious living room, only the couple remained. Talon returned to his previous demeanor. Roshan asked the girl next to her why she was lying. Lucia's tense nerves relaxed. The man in front of her was the Duke she was familiar with. Talon pulled the girl into his arms. You're not good at lying. It's all written on your face. Lucia pushed away from the man's embrace. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you. Anyway, it won't get better. Hearing this, Turan was startled. He quickly grabbed the girl's hand and said, You're not well. How can I be at ease? At this moment, Lucia's thoughts were in complete disarray. She had told the man from the beginning that she couldn't have children. At that time, he didn't care, and didn't ask why. Why suddenly now? Want to know Talon's answer? It's simple. I just suddenly want to know. Lucia told the Duke that he doesn't want to receive treatment. If he gets better, it will be difficult for the Duke. Talon asked in confusion, why? Lucia shouted in embarrassment, Don't you want to have children with me? Talon was taken aback. The misunderstanding originated here. But there was a reason she didn't want to have children with Lucia. If the heir is to continue the Talon family's bloodline with a foreign woman, the Duchess must consume her husband's blood for over a year. Then the two of them must spend a night together. This secret was only known to Philip. Under her severe torture, Philip finally revealed this secret. So it's not that she didn't want to have children with Lucia, but that he didn't want to continue the Talon family's bloodline. But to Lucia, this seemed like a man who simply didn't care about her. Upon hearing this, Talon finally understood his wife's thoughts. She only wanted to feel cared for. However, the man's reaction seemed to her a sign of a breakup. Lucia recalled the moment she received yellow roses. This filled her with panic. She didn't want to part ways with the Duke at all. She wanted to continue living like this, even if she couldn't win his heart. As long as she could stay by his side, Lucia was quite satisfied. He admitted that he had gotten too deep into it. Lucia expressed a desire to talk about their previous agreement. Speaking of this, Taran smiled helplessly. He was quite frustrated by the previous agreement as well. It was precisely because of this agreement that Lucia had been hesitant to open up to him. Taran held the girl on his lap. We didn't even discuss it at that time. What if we breach the contract? Lucia looked up in panic. Are you worried I won't keep my promise? Taran told him not to change the subject. Then he continued, if I stop seeking pleasure, can you open your heart to me? After saying that, Talon felt a bit cheesy. He changed his words and asked if Lucia could accept treatment. Unexpectedly, the girl was very resistant. She said that if she couldn't get pregnant and therefore couldn't have children, then she could accept it. But if she were cured, then she would really want to have a child with the Duke. Lucia looked at the man with eager anticipation. Would you agree? Talon hesitated a bit. He couldn't tell Lucia the family's secret. These dark secrets were his burden to bear alone. Anyway, without that method, Lucia wouldn't be able to get pregnant at all. Should he agree to him? In that case, he should be very happy, right? But Talon doesn't want to deceive him. I don't need heirs. Lucia thought it was because he was worried about inheriting the family fortune. She quickly said she could write a guarantee. Even if it meant giving up the inheritance rights, that would be fine. Talon said it wasn't because of that. Then he hinted to the girl. He just doesn't want to leave his bloodline behind. But Lucia doesn't understand. Isn't Damien his bloodline? Speaking of his son, Talon's expression changed. One can only say Damien is different. There are simply too many things he cannot explain to Lucia. He will never tell his wife. Damien is actually not his biological son. Lucia felt a bit uncomfortable under the man's unabashed gaze. She sullenly acknowledged it. I know it's Talon's tradition. Talon's tone became somewhat urgent. He asked his wife if they could continue living like this. Lucia hesitated. Finally lowering her head, she finally spoke the truth. Lucia told the Duke that she might have been too greedy. When she was alone, she always wanted someone to keep her company. The man was somewhat puzzled. Hadn't he always been by her side? Lucia repeated it again. Are you saying you'll always be by my side? After all this time, Taran had no idea what Lucia was trying to express with her strange words. Impatiently, he asked what she meant. The girl's expression was somewhat disappointed. In the end, she shouted in frustration that he didn't love her at all. You just want a wife who doesn't love the world. I won't love you either. What else can there be between us? Lucia said these words intending to make Talon feel pain. But after seeing the helpless and hurt expression on Talon's face, he suddenly felt a pang of heartache. It was as if he saw Talon's true self. Talon quietly looked at the woman before him, hesitating to say anything. He lowered his head to adjust his emotions. The man returned to his cold and indifferent demeanor. Yes, the ending was determined from the very beginning. The conversation between the two ended on a sour note. For a week after that day, Lucia had dinner alone every night. Talon claimed to be busy with work. He even ate in the office. He knew the Duke was avoiding him. At that moment, Meishin felt a sharp pain. His migraine had flared up again. Taiju was quite frightened. Lucia forced herself to stay calm. She reassured everyone that she was fine. Then she asked Taiju to have Anai prepare some medicine for her headache. After saying that, she got up and returned to the bedroom. Just a few steps. Lucia recalled their conversation that day. He told the Duke that he didn't want to give without receiving, and he certainly didn't want unrequited love, so he would not breach the agreement. Lucia lay in bed, staring at the still door. He knows that the man definitely won't come tonight. No matter how late it was before, he would quietly come in. Then he would hold him and sleep together. They had only been in a cold war for a week, yet he feels like it has been 7 days. He can't imagine what the final outcome of this marriage will be. What will it look like? Lucia stared at the doorway for a long time. She had clearly made up her mind to be lonely for life, but the man was gentle and considerate to her. But now, suddenly it had to be cut off completely. Lucia felt that this feeling was truly unbearable. The details of their sweet moments together kept flashing in her mind. Lucia kept telling herself it was all her fault. But as she thought about it, tears started to slip from the corners of her eyes. Everything is clearly her own fault. If she weren't so greedy and obsessed about wanting a child, just for the sake of a stable life, everything would be just like it was before. On the other side, Talon was meditating with his eyes closed in the office. The rain outside keeps falling down. It's driving people crazy. Ever since that day when the two parted on bad terms, he has been avoiding Lucia for several days. But actually, less than 2 days later, he took the chance while the girl was in the garden, and kept peeking at her. Even he thought he was being pathetic. In just a few days, he actually felt like time was dragging on forever. He thought about throwing himself into work, but found that nothing was going smoothly. It was simply a waste of time. And he did this just to prove that he wouldn't be affected by anyone. He thought it would be easy, but finding that I had held on for so long, would instantly collapse upon seeing him. This feeling is too unbearable. How can he be swayed by a woman? Absolutely impossible. Just then, the secretary knocked on the study door. Sure enough, it was another stack of documents. Just as the secretary was about to leave quietly, Talon called him back. When does that kid have a break? Go-Dan smiled gently. Fortunately, the master was asking about the young master. Go-Dan told the master that the young master's school does not have holidays, but he can go out. Then let him come back. Go-Dan weakly reminded. The semester has just begun. If he wants to come back, he might need to apply in advance. Go-Dan was still chattering on. trying to persuade the master not to act on impulse. The next second, he received the master's demise. Stare. Dog Dan immediately stopped the flower tube and said he would take care of it. The young master was sent to his stepfather's school at the age of 6. This was his first time back home in 2 years. Just then, the door was knocked on again. It was the leader of the knights. The leader handed a scroll to the master. Talon's expression changed dramatically after seeing it. Then he revealed a bloodthirsty smile. The northern territory is in turmoil. He must hurry to comment as quickly as possible. Talon is methodically arranging the troop movements. At this moment, Secretary Dog Dan asked with some concern, "Will you be gone for long?" Because during the time the master is away, the young master is very likely to come home. How will the young master get along with Lucia then? This is also a very tricky question. Charon thought for a few seconds. Then he suggested letting Dog Egg welcome the kid. On the way back, give him a good warning. He must always show utmost respect to his mother. Charon warned the secretary. If he hears any gossip after he returns, he will definitely make those involved pay the price. After making arrangements, Talon curled up in the back of the chair and began to think. According to the news from that kid's school, he probably knows what kind of person Damien is. He is not as kind as his father, but he doesn't seem to show any cruelty either. When he first met that kid, he originally wanted to get rid of him on the spot, but as soon as Talon saw those eyes, it was like seeing his own twin brother, so he spared that kid's life. If compared to Lucia, Lucia is completely just a pure little bunny. Damn it, I can't believe I'm thinking of him again. Ever since he ascended to the Duke's position, he has been adhering to one principle. That is, no matter what you do, you must return in kind. Treat others as they treat you. So he has always resisted the affection of his lovers, because he cannot offer an equivalent response. It was Brother Shio who transformed him from a reckless beast into a truly flesh and blood person. But once he had emotions, he became easily controlled. Duke Qian always used Shio as a bargaining chip. Make him obedient. Later, Duke Qian died. Shio also died. As he lost the meaning of living on, he also discovered the Turan's dirty secret. Turan increasingly despised the blood flowing in his veins. So from that moment on, he vowed never to let anyone or anything control him. Turan kept reminding himself to be tough. The will must be strong. There absolutely cannot be any special existence. He has already suffered because of Shogu. So Lucia's existence must not repeat the same mistake. The man's mind suddenly recalled the girl's hysterical declaration that she wouldn't fall in love with him. He had to admit that this feeling was still unpleasant. He hadn't even gone to see the Duke for a whole week. The lady's housekeeper thought the lady had done something wrong. That's why the adults ignore me. So I asked a question. Unexpectedly, I received an impatient reply. This is not something you can meddle in. You are being too nosy. But this time, Taiju did not obediently listen to his master. Instead, he mustered the courage to say, Madam is the mistress of the Duke's house. She is different from the women you used to associate with. Please cherish Madam. Taiju became more and more agitated as he spoke. Madam went alone to the unfamiliar north. But these people who scare others. I have never heard Madam complain even once. If even you avoid Madam, then she would really be isolated and helpless. Taiju wanted to continue speaking, but the Duke interrupted him fiercely. Try saying another word. The man's face was gloomy. He remained silent, staring at his subordinate. He knew that Taiju was particularly attentive to Lucia, but now he actually dared to interfere in their affairs. He has gotten quite bold. Why don't you let him speak for himself? When Taiju heard this, his expression changed drastically. He quickly clarified that it wasn't the lady who asked him to say that. Just then, a teacup was thrown over. It brushed past Taiju. Talon had a grim face and said, I told you to shut up. Then he strode out of the study. Taiju stood frozen in place. He waited for the door to close. He suddenly went weak and slumped to the ground. He had seen the master lose his temper before, but this time it was especially terrifying. Just now, the master didn't throw the teacup at his face, which shows he was already very restrained. Taiju sighed. Now he had no face to see the lady. He originally intended to say a few words for the lady. As a result, the misunderstanding got worse. On the other side, Talon, leaving the study, paced nervously in the corridor. The words Iron Pillar had just said replayed in his mind. He was well aware that this was not instigated by Lucia. He understood even more the predicament Lucia was in at that moment. The person who knew him best was clearly himself. He was the first to know that he couldn't have children. Yet back then, he just laughed it off. Totally indifferent. Charon covered his eyes. He couldn't quite describe the feeling inside. On the other side, Lucia was busy dealing with Dr. Anna. Anna was already worried sick about the lady's illness. The Duke called her over every night to report on the treatment. So Anna could only come to bother the lady every day. Lucia didn't expect that man to be so persistent. Since that's the case, then he will have it his way. He tells Anna everything he experienced when leaving the nest. Sure enough, Anna is also at a loss. Just as Lucia lets out a sigh of relief, Anna, with a serious face, declares that she will definitely find a way. At first, Lucia thought the man had changed his mind, and was willing to accept having children. Unexpectedly, the man said resolutely, It's impossible to have a child. Lucia retorted, But what if I receive treatment, but you still sleep with me, and then I get pregnant? The man helplessly stroked his chin. Then it wouldn't be my child. Lucia was stunned on the spot. Her eyes were filled with shock and disappointment. She never expected to hear such words from him. Talon regretted what he had just said. He knew he had spoken incorrectly. He hurriedly tried to explain. All he heard was the girl's cold voice. Do you mean you won't acknowledge the child's identity? Or do you mean to conclude that I would betray my marriage and fool around with others? Talon knew he had to apologize now, then explain that he didn't mean it that way. But the words turned into hurtful knives on his tongue. He just left the living room, saying whatever came to mind. He didn't know how to face Lucia. He could only awkwardly retreat. After dating so many women, this was the first time he felt such complex emotions. The memories came to an abrupt stop. Talon had already walked back and forth in the pavilion several times. Taiju even thought it was Lucia who had made a mistake. Clearly, it was her who had erred. The sun gradually set. Unknowingly, Talon had walked into the garden. The day had passed in a haze of thoughts. Just as Talon was about to turn and leave, suddenly, a graceful figure in the distance caught her attention. It was Lucia. The girl stood under the vines, seemingly lost in thought. Tara struggled internally for several seconds. Her fists clenched and then relaxed. Still, she gathered her courage and took a few steps forward. The girl heard the noise and turned around. The two had endured a week of Cold War. For the first time, standing face to face. It wasn't as tense as I imagined. Lucia was still the same as every time I saw her. She revealed that smile that only she has. In that moment, all the frustration that had been weighing on Tarung's heart vanished. He then realized that what he feared was not being controlled by Lucia at all, but losing the girl's smile. At this moment, Lucia slowly spoke. The weather is really nice. Lucia's smile completely disarmed Talon. The two acted as if nothing had happened. They chatted happily in the garden. Talon told Lucia that he would soon be leaving Loya to attend to some matters in the northern territory. The exact duration of his absence was still uncertain. Lucia didn't ask further. He just took him to sit down in the courtyard. Talon quietly stared at the girl in front of him who was pretending to be strong. Then he reached out and gently placed his hand on her. The girl's gaze momentarily lost focus. Talon asked her what she had been up to lately. Lucia smiled and said it was the same as usual. Then she mentioned that it felt strange like this now. It was as if we hadn't seen each other for a long time. But in reality, only a few days have passed. Charan's face showed a bit of embarrassment. It turns out the clown was actually himself. He clearly felt like it had been a long time. But when he thought about how he was the only one suffering, while Lucia seemed unaffected, he felt a bit sad. But he didn't want Lucia to suffer like he did. Charan gently caressed the girl's cheek. They hadn't been close for a long time. The girl seemed so fragile, as if she would shatter with a single touch. But why did she cause him such great distress? Charan spoke softly. That day, I spoke without thinking. I apologize to you. I never intended to see you as anything less than real. Then Charan told the girl the truth about the family bloodline. He tried to express it in the simplest terms. The Charan family bloodline is rare. It is very difficult to conceive. So, Lucia would have a hard time having children. He didn't want the girl to have hopes only to be disappointed. I'm sorry for hurting the girl with such nonsense. He slowly revealed a smile. She said it was fine. But tears suddenly flowed down. They fell down in an instant. The two were shocked. Lucia quickly explained that she was supposed to laugh, but the tears kept coming more and more. In the end, she just lost control and cried. Talon hurriedly got up and squatted in front of the girl. He kept apologizing over and over. He didn't know how long Lucia had been holding back. All Talon knew was that seeing her cry made his heart feel like it was breaking. For Lucia, before meeting the Duke, he felt like a walking corpse every day. He hated him. He even decided that when they met, he would give him a big slap. But when he actually saw him, he felt all the accumulated grievances and dissatisfaction vanish into thin air. In this vast world, he could only see the two of them. It seemed like a similar situation had happened before. Lucia remembered. It was the first time they met. That day, the Duke was on horseback, full of vigor. Everyone was cheering for him, but in his eyes, there was only her. However, at the moment Lucia shed tears, he had already forgiven the man in front of him. He was not crying out of grievance, but because of the man's gentle tone, and the hand that caressed his cheek. All of this made him so happy. It was as if they had returned to a few months ago, when he was afraid of getting trapped. So there's always this sense of dread. Now he has made his intentions clear, and he has accepted the Duke's affection. Lucia clearly knows that she is different from the other women the Duke has been with. At least she possesses a status they never had. Lucia is the lawful wife of the Duke of Talon. Understand this clearly. Lucia decided to make some changes. That means she would no longer love him in a humble manner. She would love him within her own acceptable limits. And on the basis of equality with a man, she would give her all to love him. Lucia pushed the Duke away. Feigning seriousness, she asked, "Do you realize your mistake?" Talon was taken aback by the girl. This situation startled me. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. Lucia spoke to herself, saying she forgave me. Then she expressed that she had two conditions. This was the first time in a long while that my wife made a request. Charan, of course, listened obediently to what was said. The girl paused for a moment. She first stated her first request. I want a kiss to reconcile. The man's pupils trembled slightly. Then the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Without any hesitation, Talon pecked at the girl's lips. With conditions like this, even if there were 100 more, he would gladly agree. After the kiss, Talon proactively asked for the second request. Lucia spat out a word, altering the contract. He said at the time that he would not interfere in the Duke's private life. But this clearly meant agreeing to his public infidelity. But I hope that even if you have a lover, you won't let me find out. The man looked aggrieved. He weakly expressed that he wouldn't cheat outside. Even after marriage, he hasn't properly looked at other women. Okay. Lucia told her husband that if he ever grew tired of her, or found another woman and wanted to leave, he should tell her right away. Don't let her find out through someone else. Charan sighed. He knew he had always seemed inadequate in Lucia's eyes, but who could blame him for being such a mess in the past? Charan softly kisses the back of his wife's hand. It's all up to you. When he first received the scroll sent from the territory, Charan wasn't sure how long he would be gone, but after seeing the girl's smile again, he knew when he would return. I'll be back soon. Lucia smiled brightly. Safe travels. However, at this time in the capital, the news of Duke Talon's marriage was causing quite a stir. Since no one had attended her wedding, everyone's curiosity was heightened. Especially the young noble ladies, who broke down in tears upon hearing the news. After all, Duke Talon was the dream of countless girls. The Crown Prince is also investigating the Duchess. He's looking into the Duchess's background. I hear the Duchess is a princess. He immediately sent people to secretly investigate, but they didn't find any useful information. They only know her name and age. Even her appearance was learned from his maidservant. The Crown Prince is extremely frustrated by this. I wanted to ask the guard sent by Talon next to me, but Ergo is the master's loyal dog. He would never spread such idle talk. The prince is practically driven mad. On the other side, Madame Lucienne is also troubled by this matter. At first, upon learning that Duke Talon was getting married, she didn't feel much, because she knew she was the exception. Although she has been married 3 times, she has never entertained the thought of marrying a man again. As long as she can be the lover that Talon will never forget, she is already content. Watching those women who are heartbroken over Talon, she only feels pity. She knows very well that, once a man gets tired of his wife, naturally, it will come to find itself. But unexpectedly, the next day he received the yellow rose. He was frightened, angry, and confused. Thinking carefully, he hadn't done anything wrong. He had never contacted him first, nor had he talked about their relationship everywhere. After learning that he got married, he was just avoiding the spotlight. But now he received a yellow rose. He had never seen a woman who could still meet him after receiving a yellow rose. The woman threw the flower on the ground. He certainly didn't want to end this relationship. Could it be that Talon got married, so she needs to sort out her lover? He didn't believe that scoundrel was that loyal. Lucian pondered back and forth. There's only one possibility. It must be that the woman instructed by the Duchess knows about her existence. That's why she urged the man to cut ties with her. A raging hatred ignited in Lucian's eyes. She heard that the woman is named Lucia. She felt it was necessary to learn more about that woman. On the other side, Luoyan, a certain boarding school. The secretary stopped the carriage, and slowly walked towards the boy standing at the school gate. Young master, I have come to take you home. Suddenly summoned home by his father to get along harmoniously with his stepmother. The boy's first question to the secretary was actually, is she pretty? Seeing the secretary hesitate, Damien probably figured it out. That stepmother probably doesn't look very good. Facing the intense pressure from the young master, the secretary really couldn't handle it. He clearly felt what it meant to have bloodline oppression. The cold-blooded demeanor of this father and son is simply carved from the same mold. The secretary steeled himself to relay the master's instructions to the young master. The adult said he hopes the young master won't be disrespectful to his mother, to be respectful and deferential. Damien, who always acted according to his father's mood, instantly understood the meaning of this phrase. His father was merely warning him to behave himself. He knew that as an illegitimate child, his existence was quite shameful. So even if his father didn't say it, he wouldn't overstep. Damien quietly gazed out the window. He guessed that his new mother probably wouldn't welcome him. If he was disliked, he would just stay in his room and not go out. He had already prepared himself to endure. When he first heard about his father's marriage, he wasn't very surprised. After all, his father was so cold, always goal-oriented. So he thought that his father was just at the time to conclude things, and this wouldn't shake his position as the heir. So Damien didn't take it seriously. Damien roughly calculated that he wouldn't stay in Luoyan for more than a week, including travel time. That's 3 weeks. He just hoped there wouldn't be a situation where he missed an entire semester. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lady Lucy finally found the Duchess's information. Looking at the woman's photo, Lucy was quite puzzled. She didn't consider her to be a beauty at all, and it didn't match the Duke of Turin's taste. So how did they end up getting involved? Lucy spent a long time uncovering a clue. That is, the 16th princess residing in another palace actually took the initiative to attend the night celebration banquet. Besides this, she also found out that Lucia, as a princess, frequently disguised herself as a maid to leave the palace. So her basic judgment is that this princess is definitely not simple. At first, when she received her floral scent, Lucia had already let her guard down significantly, but now she felt increasingly uneasy. She was very worried that Duke Talon had already fallen for her. After staring for a while, Lucian comforted herself. Perhaps the man was just temporarily interested. He might come looking for her one day. After all, men don't really understand love. After struggling internally for a while, Lucian suddenly had the impulse to go north to meet the Duchess. She wanted to see for herself if this pomegranate princess truly couldn't catch the Duke's eye. This would help quell her inner unease. But if she doesn't use the portal, it would take her months to travel by carriage. However, taking the portal to the north requires the Duke of Talon's approval. Although she could forge the formal approval, if she were caught by the men, Lucia didn't dare to think any further. Anyway, they would eventually come to the dynasty one day. Lucia decided to deal with it then. Suddenly, another doubt popped into my mind. That is, why did Lucia disguise herself as a maid to leave the palace? Could it be that she has a lover outside the palace? The driver, Shiluo, showed a sly smile. This idea must be correct. He needs to dig out more details. On the other side, Luoyan. Ever since Talon went to the Northern Territory, Lucia can only pass the time by writing every day. But after Taiju shared his interesting stories about writing, the girl became despondent. When will he come back? The topic changed a bit too quickly. Taiju was done for a few seconds. After he reacted, he quickly estimated the time. At least another month. Lucia didn't expect it to take this long. Her mood became even more desolate. She only knew it was a matter concerning the territory, but she wasn't clear on the specifics. Previously, due to the prior contract, she deliberately avoided matters concerning men. But now she wanted to learn more. Taiju told the lady, the master goes through this routine every year at this time. It's a customary affair. Because the north is adjacent to the barbarians, there are often conflicts and wars. To fend them off, the Talon family has a tradition of leading the army against them for many years. Previously, due to the war, the master couldn't go to war every year, so they can only send knights over. It's precisely because of this that the barbarians have become increasingly arrogant lately. That's why the lord is leading the campaign personally. Lucia understood the situation roughly. Just as she took a sip of tea, the girl suddenly let out a scream. Lucia asked Taiju in terror, is today the adult's birthday? He actually forgot such an important thing. He clearly asked before. Taiju also remembered it well, but during this time, he was busy having a falling out with him. He completely forgot about the birthday. The girl looked at the butler with tearful eyes. Why didn't you remind me before he left? She didn't even celebrate his birthday before her husband went off to war. Taiju hesitated to speak. He then told the lady that the lord has actually never celebrated a birthday.